Hey guys, tonight we're stepping barefoot into the strange, perfumed haze of medieval highs. You're squinting against the morning mist as you pad quietly through the walled garden of a monastery, somewhere in the English countryside. Maybe Burgundy. Bees hum lazily. Dew clings to lavender. And a few sleepy monks are bent over a patch of tall-stemmed flowers with bulbous heads, opium poppies. Their white petals blushing pink in the rising sun. Yes, you're standing in a medieval pharmacy, run by men who take vows of silence, and also happen to keep some pretty serious stash under lock and key. One monk gives you a nod and opens a weathered wooden door. Inside, the cool stone cloister smells of beeswax, incense, and something more. Narcotic. On a cluttered work table, laid between a book of hours and some dried sage, is a ceramic vessel labeled Lacrima Papaveris, tears of the poppy. It's not poetic, it's literal. You're looking at medieval opium, collected drop by drop from poppy pods. You won't be lighting up or popping pills here. This is more slow-release trance. The monks grind the dried latex into a powder and mix it with wine, honey, or vinegar to make tinctures. It's used to dull the agony of battle wounds, ease the pain of kidney stones, and, depending on the dosage, I drop someone into a sleep so deep, it was sometimes mistaken for death. You sip a tiny bit from a wooden spoon, offered by Brother Odric. Your tongue tingles, your limbs go quiet, you feel syrupy. And now you understand how people used to get through plague surgeries without screaming. Historians still argue whether monks were fully aware of opium's mind-altering effects, or just considered it divine mercy in a bottle. But medieval texts hint at more than just pain relief. A 12th century manuscript describes visions during deep sacred sleep, glowing figures, et célestiales voix, ecstatic warmth, written in a marginal note that ends with best reserved for the Sabbath. One fun tidbit: poppy use was often listed on monastery inventory lists alongside wine, beeswax, dried figs, and saffron. Quite the pantry. Some scribes were known to dose themselves lightly to maintain focus during long copying sessions. So next time you're slogging through Excel sheets at 1 a.m., just remember medieval monks did it first with herbal microdosing and no breaks, but not everyone approved. By the 14th century, some church authorities grew suspicious. One overly pious reformer claimed too many abbots retired to their beds with dreamy eyes and forgot the bells. He wasn't wrong. Some abbeys became more spa retreat than spiritual haven, with guests requesting the sleepy syrup as casually as holy water. Eventually, stricter monasteries banned the poppy elixirs outside of extreme cases. But by then, the secret was out, and traveling healers, midwives, and even bored, noble ladies had picked up on the trend. You're lying on a simple cot now, under a wool blanket, somewhere deep in the infirmary. Outside, a bell tolls softly. The candle flickers. You feel warm, oddly floaty. There's a buzzing in your ears, not unpleasant. The monk sitting nearby smiles gently and whispers a Latin prayer. You're not sure if he's praying for your soul or just trying to remember what day it is. And then, the strangest thing, your mind opens like a cathedral window. Light spills in. You hear birdsong from miles away. You smell lavender from last summer. Your body is present, but yourself is floating. Watching, you try to speak, but no words come. Just calm. You're not high in the modern sense. You're elevated, softened, slightly unglued from time. A passing brother jots something into the infirmary logbook administered opium to the guest. He now sleeps peacefully under God's gaze. Welcome to the medieval high quiet, medicinal, and secretly psychedelic. But the next place you'll end up, well, let's just say it won't involve monks or silence. In fact, it's going to smell strongly of goat, sweat, and questionable beer. You wake up with a headache, and the distinct feeling that someone just threw a chicken at you. You're sitting on a lopsided wooden bench in the corner of a smoky tavern. The floor is sticky. The air is yeasty. Somewhere nearby, a dog is barking at a turnip. You blink, dazed, as a large woman slams down a frothy mug of ale in front of you. Her apron's filthy. Her grin is missing teeth. And her name, probably something like Maud, is said in tones of both fear and respect. Welcome to the alehouse, your new spiritual retreat. You're not here for prayer or pain relief tonight. You're here because this is one of the few places in medieval life where you can let loose, is get loud. And if the brew is especially enhanced, see things that shouldn't technically exist. That mug of ale, it's not your average barley water. No, sire. It's been fermented by an alewife, a woman who brews beer at home and sells it locally. She's been at it for generations, using herbs from her garden and whatever wild additives she thinks might improve the taste or the effect. Ingo hops, yarrow, and heather, and sometimes a little something special. Henbane, maybe datura, belladonna, if she's feeling bold. These are all part of a group called the Gruit herbs, and they can turn your basic medieval beer into a bubbling cauldron of euphoria, paranoia, or both. Historians still argue whether most people drinking these concoctions even realized they were being chemically altered. Maybe they just thought the goat was always talking back. You take a swig. It's bitter, herbal, thick. Your throat burns a little. A few minutes later, your face is flushed. Your chest is warm, and the lute player in the corner starts sounding like he's underwater. You're not hallucinating yet, but your sense of time just got squishy. Someone is dancing. Badly. Someone else is loudly challenging a dog to a wrestling match. You feel unreasonably confident. Here's a mainstream fact to keep you grounded before hops became the standard for beer in the late Middle Ages. Brews varied wildly by region and household. Some were strong, some weak, and some were, let's say, flirtatiously toxic. There are court records of people accusing alewives of bewitching their beer because it caused visions and lustful dreaming. But it's more likely these women were just excellent at crafting psychotropic cocktails and had no time for your judgment. One bit, in some towns, ale testing was official business. An inspector, often the reeve or a designated ale conner, would show up, drink a sample, and decide whether it was fit for sale. In rare cases, they'd sit on a bench in ale-soaked leather pants to see how sticky it got. If you got stuck, too strong. If not, you passed. Cheers to the medieval QA process. But back to your trip. You're now sweating, laughing, maybe crying a little. The tavern is vibrating with rowdy warmth. One man claims to see angels in the rafters. A woman is convinced her spoon is cursed. You, meanwhile, are petting a jug like it's a beloved pet. Across the table, a farmer tells you about the time he drank Maud's special mead and woke up in a tree, and yet there's a comfort in all this chaos. Life in the medieval world is harsh, dirty, and short. A night like this, it's escape, whether from hunger, heartbreak, or the sound of your neighbor's goat sneezing at dawn. People needed something that lifted them. even if that something occasionally made you believe your feet were on fire. One woman at the hearth is singing a song about Saint Bridget and fermented milk. A boy is spinning in circles. Maud ladles something suspicious into another mug and winks. You ask what's in it. Don't ask, she says, but drink it while it's warm. You do, and for a brief, flickering moment, the room goes soft and golden. You're not in a grimy alehouse anymore. You're floating, smiling. The fire crackles in rhythm with your heartbeat, and somewhere in the back of your mind, you hear the echo of monks chanting, or maybe that's just the turnip. Either way, you're not leaving just yet. It's well past midnight now, and you're no longer in the tavern. You're in the woods. Specifically, in a mossy clearing surrounded by gnarled trees and the occasional glint of moonlight on damp leaves. A fire crackles in the center, and beside it crouches an old woman with a face like a walnut. She wears layers of tattered wool, beads made from teeth, and a grin that implies she knows exactly what she's doing. She waves you closer. Congratulations. You've stumbled into the domain of the village wise woman, or depending on who's doing the labeling, a midwife, herbalist, or suspected witch. And she's about to smear something suspicious on your skin. She calls it flying ointment. And no, it's not just for bruises. This goop, stored in a worn earthen jar and smelling faintly of goat fat and death, is a legendary blend of mandrake, belladonna, henbane, and sometimes a hint of hemlock, if the mood strikes. All highly toxic, all known to produce vivid hallucinations, sensations of weightlessness, and in some accounts, actual out-of-body experiences. The active compounds tropane alkaloids, the sensation you, naked, riding through the night sky on a broomstick. Historians still argue whether anyone ever actually thought they were flying, or whether the flight was purely metaphorical, a mix of drug-induced visions and psychological liberation. But the records are juicy. Inquisitors during the witch trials collected dozens of confessions, describing the same thing, a cold salve, rubbed into thighs and wrists, followed by visions of dancing in forests, feasting with horned gods, and, yes, flying above rooftops. You hesitate, but the old woman grabs your hand and smears a dab across your wrist. It tingles cold, then hot. Your breath catches. The woods shift. Suddenly, the fire flares higher, and you swear the trees are leaning in to watch. You sit, but the ground feels far away. You hear drums. No, her hooves. Wait, is someone singing in Latin? A mainstream fact, mandrake root was incredibly famous in medieval Europe, partly because of its human-like shape, and partly because of the strange rituals used to harvest it. People believed it screamed when pulled from the ground. To avoid this, herbalists supposedly tied it to a dog and let the animal yank it free, sacrificing the poor mutt in the process. Nothing like a little barked martyrdom with your buzz. Meanwhile, your heartbeat slows. You're still in the clearing, but it's pulsing with color now. Stars drip from the sky like wax. You feel unburdened by flesh. Lifted. Euphoric. The old woman chants something in a language you don't know but understand. Here's a fringe tidbit for you. Some scholars suggest that stories of witches flying to sabbats were early attempts to explain these drug-induced experiences, especially since many witches arrested claimed they had never left their homes, but still attended wild feasts in distant forests. Your limbs are warm, floaty. Someone hands you a cup of something dark and spicy spiced wine. Maybe. Or crushed nightmares. You sip, It burns. You laugh. Your laughter echoes twice. And then, just as quickly, the magic begins to turn. Your skin itches. The fire's too loud. A shadow between the trees looks far too real. You ask the woman if this is normal. Only if you survive. She says cheerfully. One scholar describes this as the dangerous intersection of folk medicine and spiritual ecstasy. Another calls it just girls trying to vibe before they got burned at the stake. Both might be right. The church, predictably, hated everything about these ointments. The flying, the female autonomy, the lack of clerical supervision. So midwives and herbalists became targets. Their salves were rebranded as tools of Satan, their visions as demonic trickery. You lie back on damp leaves. The stars wheel above you. You can't move, but you're not afraid. Not exactly. It's like your soul is halfway through a window and considering whether to climb all the way out. Then, slowly, the warmth fades. The fire dims. The trees return to normal. You're shivering now, still lying on the moss. The woman is gone, or maybe she was never there. You sit up. There's dew on your lips. Your heart feels tired, but your mind is open, stretched. Like parchment, hung to dry. You've flown, or hallucinated flying, or rubbed poison on your thighs in the woods at night. Either way, not your average Saturday. The world is dry and buzzing now. No more forests. No more taverns. You're riding across scorched earth. The sun blazing above. Your robes sticky with sweat and dust. A crusader's tabard clings to your chest, and your saddle creaks beneath you. Behind, the distant domes of Jerusalem shimmer in the heat haze. Ahead, nothing but road and a strange new secret tucked deep in your satchel. You're not just bringing home holy relics, exotic spices, or suspiciously shiny rocks, blessed by monks with suspiciously large coin purses. No, you've got something else. A little putch, a little pipe, a story passed around smoky tents after long battles and longer nights. Hashish. You first tried it under a starlit sky in a crusader encampment, seated cross-legged with local guides, who called it queef or hashish. It looked like resin, smelled like spice and incense, and when crumbled into a small ceramic pipe and lit, it filled your lungs with slow, soft fire. A minute later, time slowed to syrup. Your bones turned to silk, and you swore the moon was laughing. Mainstream fact incoming hashish has a long and storied history in the Islamic world, especially from the 9th century onward. While alcohol was forbidden under Sharia law, cannabis derivatives often occupied a legal grey area. In cities like Cairo and Baghdad, hashish tofish flourished, attracting poots, mystics, and philosophers who would sit for hours, chasing cosmic insights or simply giggling at the walls. And it wasn't just civilians. Some military groups were said to use it too, most notoriously the Hashashin, a secretive sect of Nizari Ismailis. Western accounts, often wildly exaggerated, claimed these assassins consumed hashish before embarking on stealthy missions of political murder, hence the term assassin, born from the name Hashishiyin. Historians still argue whether these warriors were actually drugged or whether their reputation was puffed up, pun, mildly intended by European chroniclers, eager for a spicy villain. You remember it now, that first pull from the pipe, the way it hit you, not like ale or flying ointments or monastery poppy tea, but smooth, deliberate, and clean. Your muscles loosened. Your mind expanded, not wildly, but elegantly, like someone had quietly opened all the windows in your skull and let the desert breeze in. A fringe detail to tickle your brain: some medieval Sufi mystics allegedly used hashish in small doses to achieve hal, a state of spiritual ecstasy and closeness to the divine. One poet described it as the kiss of green smoke upon the soul's curtain. Another claimed he spoke with angels and came back only to write poems about oranges. You're sitting beside a caravan fire now, surrounded by men in layered robes, the scent of cloves and cardamom swirling in the air. A pipe is passed to you again. This time, you know what to expect. You exhale slowly, gaze into the coals, and feel the world stretch into something holy. Of course, back in Europe, things are a bit less poetic. You return home with your exotic knowledge, and no one quite believes your stories. They don't understand the slow-burning joy of hashish, the sacred stillness it brings. Some call it devil's smoke. Others call you a liar. One French monk asks if it made you dance with camels. You decide not to explain. Still, you keep your stash hidden. On stormy nights, you light your pipe in secret, whispering prayers in a language you don't speak but somehow remember. The walls hum gently. The rain sounds like harps, and you feel not high, exactly, just light, like your burdens have momentarily floated off into the dark. But the church is catching on. Whispers of Eastern poisons, of Saracen tricks, spread through abbeys and courts. Anything unfamiliar becomes suspect, and soon, anything euphoric becomes heresy. Still, beneath the cloaks and crucifixes, some noblemen and monks keep a pinch of dark resin in their traveling cases right next to the rosary. You ride again at dawn, alone. The road stretches ahead, vast and golden. The hashish pouch lies quietly in your pack, the last warm ember of a far-off land, and the unspoken truth. Sometimes, getting high in the Middle Ages meant more than escape. It meant connection to the heavens, to the self, to the strange, echoing silence of the infinite. The bells are ringing again, but this time, they sound wrong. You're standing in the middle of a bustling medieval village square. Music plays. People laugh. Someone juggles eels for no clear reason. And then, like a dropped curtain, everything shifts. The laughter becomes shrieking. The music warps. The dancers stumble. And someone starts tearing their clothes off in the street. Welcome to ergot poisoning, also known as Saint Point. Anthony's fire, also known as oops. We accidentally bake psychedelic mold into the bread again. It all begins with rye, specifically rye that's been infected by a fungus called Claviceps purpurea. Under the right conditions, damp fields, poor harvest monitoring this mold, grows along the grain and produces toxic alkaloids that, when baked into bread, create something, shall we say, stimulating. Historians still argue whether most outbreaks were recognized for what they were, or if villagers simply thought God was really mad. But the symptoms, oh, they were unforgettable. Burning limbs, convulsions, hallucinations, spontaneous screaming, uncontrollable dancing, and sometimes the sensation of your skin being eaten by invisible wolves. Not exactly a chill evening. You take a bite of this fateful rye loaf, thin, heavy, sour, with a strange aftertaste, and suddenly your world tips sideways. The cobblestones shimmer. A rooster asks you a riddle. Someone's shadow dances without them, and you are laughing because everything is both hilarious and terrifying. A mainstream fact, the infamous dancing plague of 1518 where dozens of people in Strasbourg reportedly danced non-stop for days, some even to death, has been speculated by some scholars to be linked to ergot-contaminated bread. Others point to mass psychogenic illness, religious fervor, or social hysteria. But the idea of moldy rye turning a town into a medieval rave hard to resist. You stumble through the crowd now, laughing, sobbing, spinning. Around you, people do the same. A woman clutches her baby and insists he's sprouted wings. A merchant throws his goods into the river, claiming they're cursed. You lock eyes with a blacksmith, and for a moment, both of you think you're made of light. A bit in some regions. Affected villagers were taken to shrines dedicated to Saint Lead, Anthony the Great, where monks offered herbal treatments, warm baths, and prayer. One of the remedies involved mixing pig fat, ashes, and wine into a paste, and applying it to the limbs, either to soothe the burning sensation or distract you with its sheer weirdness. You're lying on your back now, somewhere between a hay cart and eternity. The sky is blinking. You feel as if you're floating above your body, held by invisible threads. You watch yourself laugh, and it's disconcerting. Eventually, the madness fades. For some, it takes hours. For others, days. And for the unlucky, the poisoning causes gangrene and death, as the alkaloids constrict blood vessels to the point of necrosis. They called it fire for a reason. But for you, this time, it was a ride. Harrowing, unpredictable, but real. The bread that gave you visions was the same bread that fed your family. This wasn't a hedonistic indulgence. It was daily life gone sideways. The church, of course, tried to help. Kind of. Some priests blamed sin. Others blamed witches. A few tried actual medical care. Bless their hearts. But in most villages, the truth was simpler. The harvest was bad, and people ate what they had. Sometimes that meant dinner. Sometimes that meant disaster. You wake up in a quiet barn, curled next to a goat who looks just as confused as you. Your mouth is dry. Your hands are sore. But your mind, strange as it sounds, it feels rinsed, emptied, like something profound passed through you. Even if you couldn't name it, you look at the remaining bread in your pouch, break it in half, and feed it to the goat. It sniffs once, then walks away. Smart goat. Morning breaks through a curtain of herbal smoke. You're inside a thatched hut at the edge of a forest, one of those places where maps used to just write, "Here, be spirits." Outside, birds call softly. Inside, everything smells like earth, ash, and rosemary. The ceiling is low, the air thick, and in the center of the room, a small cauldron simmers over embers. A woman in a soot-streaked dress wafts curls of smoke toward a man lying on a mat. He groans. Then Zeiss. You're in the care of a folk healer, and the stuff she's burning, well, depending on the village, it could be sage, thyme, juniper, or a local variant of cannabis sativa, all legal, all common, and all with interesting properties when dried, bundled, and burned in a confined space. This is a smokehouse, not for meat for people. She beckons you over. You kneel beside the mat. Your eyes sting slightly. Your pulse slows. The room spins. Not wildly, but gently like a cradle. She grinds something into a bowl, a mix of dried flowers, pine resin, and something sticky and green. It crackles when she tosses it into the embers. The aroma deepens. Your breath catches. Historians still argue whether cannabis was widely smoked in medieval Europe or used mostly in poultices and oils. The written record is sparse, but archaeological finds, including scorched hemp seeds in burial mounds, suggest at least some use in ritual or healing contexts. And, let's face it, if the Vikings brought it along on their boats, it probably wasn't just for making rope. Mainstream fact cannabis was cultivated across medieval Europe, especially for industrial purposes, ropes, textiles, even parchment. But healers knew its medicinal side too. Mixed with wine or vinegar, it was used to ease childbirth, treat gout, and reduce inflammation. Whether it was also used to send your soul on a quiet detour, that's the blurry part. Your healer sits back now, watching you with sharp eyes. She's not smiling. She's assessing. You're sweating gently. Your lime's loose. The fire hisses. You feel both grounded and unmoored, like your body is a rock and your thoughts are birds circling overhead. She murmurs a blessing, not Latin, not church approved, but old words, pre-Christian, half remembered, meant for the soil, the breath, the bones, a fringe detail to savor in some Slavic and Baltic traditions. Smoke healing wasn't just about health, it was a bridge between worlds. Shamans, herbalists, and windseers believed that certain smoke blends could open temporary pathways, allowing the sick to confront spirits or ancestors who might be meddling with their fate. No pressure. You lean back now, the smoke curling around your face. Your fingers twitch. You see flickers in the haze, animals, faces, maybe just memories, or maybe something peeking through. The healer drums softly on a goat hide bowl, and your heartbeat sinks to the rhythm. You're not hallucinating exactly, just slipping. And it's not just you. Over the centuries, people across cultures from Norse seers to Berber herbalists to Welsh cunning folk used herbal smoke to chase fever, frighten off illness, or walk sideways into the world of dreams. Of course, to the authorities, this all sounded dangerously like sorcery. The church was wary of healers who didn't stick to approved prayers and relics. A woman using foreign herbs to call spirits quickly became a woman sleeping with devils. By the late Middle Ages, many herbalists were targeted not for failure, but for success. But tonight, there are no torches, no shouting, just the hush of the hut, the crackling of green wood, and your mind wide open. You lean back, your head cushioned by straw. The healer traces something onto your forehead, a shape, a symbol. You feel calm, weightless. A warmth flows through your limbs like melted wax. You don't know what she burned. You don't need to, because right now, you're suspended between sleep and revelation, between body and memory, between cough and cosmos. And in this moment, smoke rising, heart slowing, you feel something. No night, no monk, no king could ever bottle or burn peace. You wake to silence, cold stone beneath your back. No fire, no herbs, no monk with a spoon, no laughter, just darkness, stale and close and the unmistakable scent of mildew, candle wax, and someone else's sins. You're in a cell, not a dungeon. Exactly, more like a chamber of repentance, carved into the side of a crumbling chapel, somewhere between the town's old granary and God's forgotten corners. A tiny window lets in a shaft of morning light, and through it you see pigeons fighting over a crust of bread. How poetic. You sit up slowly. Your head throbs. Your tongue is dry as parchment. In the corner, a jug of water and a crust of barley bread wait not as a gift, but as a ritual. You've been put here to purge, not your stomach, your soul. This is what happens when getting high goes wrong in medieval Europe. Maybe someone saw you licking mandrake paste off a stick in the woods. Maybe the town priest heard about the laughing fit you had after smoking that miracle incense. Or maybe you just got too loud at the alehouse again and started quoting visions of Saint Harsa, Michael wearing goatskin slippers. Whatever the cause, the outcome is the same: penance. Mainstream fact: the church in the Middle Ages viewed altered states of consciousness through a complex lens. Visions and ecstasies were acceptable if they came from saints, occurred in predictable formats, and ended in convenient theological lessons. Anything else suspicious? Especially if you were a peasant, or a woman, or just enjoying yourself too much. You remember the bishop's stern face, the way he sniffed the pouch of hashish you couldn't quite hide, his lecture about the snares of foreign poisons, then the procession to this chapel, where they locked you up and gave you exactly 3 days to reflect. Historians still debate how widespread these punishments really were. Some regions tolerated herbal traditions with a wink and a nod. Others cracked down hard. One man in 14th century Italy was flogged for inducing laughter with the devil's smoke. Another woman was forced to carry a loaf of moldy bread through the town square while chanting psalms. Your punishment: silence, prayer, and a list of sins to confess, some of which you're pretty sure the priest just made up to hit quota. A fringe tidbit to lighten the mood in some monastic orders. Monks were occasionally disciplined for inebriation via poppy or ale. Their penance: extra silence, hours, and, in one extreme case, having to copy out the Book of Lamentations by hand, twice. In Latin, left-handed, you rise, stretch, your knees crack. You walk to the narrow slit of a window and breathe in damp air. The town is waking. Children cry. A rooster screams indignantly. And somewhere, a herbalist stirs her first pot of the day, humming under her breath. You wonder if it was all worth it: the smoke, the syrup, the bread, the flying ointment. You smile. Of course it was. You didn't chase sin. You chased clarity, lightness, escape. And in a world where your days are filled with mud, illness, and impossible expectations, getting high wasn't a crime. It was a kind of survival. But survival has its costs. The door creaks. A novice enters, holding your shoes. You're being released. He says nothing, just bows, points, and waits. You step out into the pale light of morning. Your back aches. Your head is clear. A crow caws from a rooftop, sounding uncannily like it's judging you, and maybe it is. But you smile anyway. You survived. Wind down 300 words. The sun lifts higher now, softening the angles of the chapel, warming the backs of hens, scratching in the dust. You walk slowly, one foot in front of the other, your breath steady, to your senses just a little more open than before. The memories come like whispers, honey-thick poppy syrup under torchlight, belladonna's dark kiss in the forest, the giggles of ale-soaked villagers in candlelit chaos. You remember the smoke curling toward the rafters, the hymns bleeding into hallucinations, the gentle burn of something ancient and inexplicable. But here, now, in this quiet morning, everything feels more grounded. The air smells of dew and firewood. A distant bell rings, not a warning, just the hour. You pass a baker opening his shutters, and he nods at you like nothing ever happened. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it was all a fever dream, folded into the corners of an old medieval day. Your feet crunch softly on gravel. You don't speak. You don't need to, because now you know, getting high in the Middle Ages wasn't about parties or rebellion. It was about stepping sideways, slipping briefly into something larger, whether it was God, the mind, or just a really strong mushroom. It offered a pause from the world's relentless weight, and as you find a quiet place to sit beneath an oak, beside a mossy stone, you let your eyes close and your breath deepen. Let the echoes fade. Let your body grow soft again. The story's done. The fire's out. Sleep now. Hey guys. Tonight, we set sail into the salty, sunburned, sea-splashed world of ancient naval warfare. You're standing barefoot on a wooden dock, somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean, around 1200 BCE. The air smells like dead fish and ambition. Your ship waits in the shallows, a sleek, low-slung galley carved from cypress and pinned with bronze nails. Its oars like long lashes trailing across the surface. You're about to go to war, and not in a chariot or on some polished marble battlefield. No, you're about to fight in the cradle of naval combat, where the weapons are spears, the ships are rowed, and your odds of surviving the week are somewhere between Slim and Poseidon's mood. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these late-night voyages travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You board with a thud barefoot on splintered planks. Sea spray hitting your face. The oarsmen nod. They're young, sun-leathered, and frankly too tired to care who you are. This is a Bronze Age galley. Likely Mycenaean or Minoan, depending on whose livery you're flying. You're not even sure anymore. What matters is you've got a spear, a helmet that smells like someone else's head, and a stomach full of lentils, which you'll be tasting again soon. Once the waves hit, the ship creaks as it glides away from the coast, powered by 30 oarsmen per side. There's no sail, not yet. That's a luxury for trade ships. This is a warboat. Your role is simple. Stay low. Hold the line. Stab anything that tries to board. A mainstream fact to anchor us in the Bronze Age Aegean. Warships were lean, long, and designed for speed. They had shallow drafts to sneak into harbors and run aground if needed. Naval battles weren't elegant. They were close, brutal, and usually ended in boarding or burning. And most of the time, there was no dramatic strategy. Just row fast and hit first. The horizon ripples. Another galley appears dark. Narrow, sleek. It's an enemy vessel. Although that term is loose, alliances change with the tide. Your captain barks orders. The oarsmen chant in rhythm. You brace. Your ship turns, nose-dipping like a predator. Someone vomits. You grip your spear tighter. They're coming in fast. Not to ram, you're too small for that, but to scrape alongside. To leap across. To hack and slash until one side gives up or sinks. It happens quickly. A clang of bronze. A flurry of limbs. A shout. You jab at a figure lunging over the rail. He falls with a splash. Blood, yours or his, smears your forearm, and just like that, the sea reclaims its silence. You sit now, panting, the boat rocking beneath you. Around you, others mop wounds, pray, curse, or just stare. There's no cheering, only the slow realization you're still afloat. A quirky tidbit. Some early naval warriors believed in ore-blessing rituals, rubbing the handles with olive oil, mixed with goat's blood before battle. Not for grip, for luck. Some even painted tiny eyes on the prow, hoping the ship itself would see danger and steer them through, because if the boat had a soul, maybe it would choose not to drown you today. The captain orders a retreat or a pursuit. Honestly, you're too dazed to tell. The oars dig in. Water slaps the hull in lazy applause. You glance out to sea, where other galleys scatter like beetles, tiny and fragile against the blue. Historians still argue whether these early naval raids were truly tactical or just aggressive fishing trips with bonus looting. But records what little survived in clay and memory suggest coordinated actions, often tied to trade disputes, coastal raiding, or revenge. You weren't just fighting for territory. You were fighting for cargo, cattle, captives, sometimes all three. By dusk, your galley noses into a quiet inlet. You disembark with sore legs and bruised ribs. No one says much. One man collects shells. Another prays into a knot of rope. You rinse your hands, sip stale wine, and wonder how long before you sail again. The truth is, naval combat in the ancient world wasn't noble or strategic, not yet. It was intimate, grimy, inescapably personal. You fought face to face, splash to splash, and at the end of the day, the sea didn't care who won. It just wanted something back. The sun isn't even up yet, and already your hands are blistering. You're seated on a narrow wooden bench, packed elbow to elbow with 100 other men, each of you gripping an oar the way a gambler grips dice. Above, the sky shifts from slate to rose. Around you, the sea stretches out like hammered bronze. Calm now, but you know it won't stay that way. You're aboard an Athenian trireme, a marvel of classical naval engineering and the muscle car of ancient warfare. 3 tiers of oars. Yes, 3, each rowed by a single man, stacked vertically like human sardines, with really bad lumbar support. You're on the middle level, the thalamitae, with just enough headroom to make you think it won't be a problem, until you forget and knock your skull on the bench above. The bosun shouts, and the oars move as one, smooth, practiced. You've drilled this routine for weeks, in Piraeus Harbor, your thighs aching, your spine muttering threats. This isn't just rowing, it's choreography. The Athenian trireme doesn't glide, it lunges. Mainstream fact, the trireme revolutionized ancient naval combat. Light, fast, and deadly. It could hit speeds of 7 to 9 kN and turn on a drachma. It was designed to ram, to use its bronze-sheathed prow like a spear to punch holes in enemy hulls. Think of it as a guided missile, powered by olive-oiled rage and 1,000 calories of lentils. You're not far from Salamis. Themistocles' ghost might be watching. You flex your grip, Then there, a shadow on the water. The signal horn blares. Enemy ships. Persian. Maybe Phoenician spotted just beyond the reef. Your heart kicks. The captain yells to pick up speed. Oars slash the water in perfect timing. Your body moving before your mind can protest. The sea froths beneath you, and then impact. Your trireme hits the enemy side on, with a horrible crunch. The prow, burying itself in planks like an angry woodpecker. You stagger forward. Spear in hand. But there's no boarding, not yet. You pull back. Reset. Aim again. The goal isn't to fight. It's to sink. Death by geometry. Historians still argue whether the famed ramming tactics were as consistent in execution as the texts claim. Some believe that in the chaos of war, most battles devolved into floating mosh pits. But if you timed it right, if your helmsman had the instincts of a falcon and your oarsman didn't panic, you could slice through a fleet like a hot bronze knife. The second hit splits the target ship's stern. Men fall, overboard, armor dragging them down like anchors. A few cling to broken timbers. One of your crewmates tosses them a rope. The officer scowls. That wasn't protocol. A quirky tidbit to tide you over. Some triremes had names painted on the prow, often goddesses. Fears. Or deeply questionable jokes. One was reportedly called Wet Widowmaker. Another, Athena's Elbow. Yours, it's simply Whistler. You've never heard it whistle. The enemy flees. Not defeated, just scattered. Your trireme pulls back. Not for mercy, but to reset and prepare another pass. This isn't a duel. It's demolition. And you're the wrecking crew, but battle fatigue sets in fast. You're wet, aching, salt-burned, and half-deaf from the shouting, and still the work continues. Oars back in, turn the hull, brace for another lunge. Again and again, you start to understand why Athenian citizens who could afford it paid someone else to do this for them. You get a moment to rest. Bread and olives. No wine yet. Just enough time to sit beneath the shade of the sail, if it's unfurled, and marvel at the cunning of naval strategy. Your captain once explained how certain formations, like the Dyack Plus, a maneuver where you row through enemy lines and wheel around to attack from behind, could win entire battles if executed properly. You nodded back then. You barely understood. Now you do, because it's not about chaos. It's about timing, control, speed. You glance at your crewmates. Their faces are hollowed out, sunburned, teeth clenched. These are not glory-hungry warriors. They're survival artists. Every row pulls you closer to either victory or the ocean floor. By sunset, the enemy is gone. Your trireme limps back towards land. Oars feathering lazily now. The harbor ahead flickers with torchlight. You're sore, in places you forgot existed. Someone hums a hymn to Poseidon. The helmsman spits into the sea for luck, for thanks, or just because he's too tired to care. You pull into dock. Ropes thrown. Wood creaks. Men disembark with the stiffness of aging statues. Tonight, you'll sleep on stone with the smell of pitch in your nostrils. And tomorrow, if the city demands it, you'll row again, because in classical Greece, war wasn't just fought on land, it was built on sweat, speed, and one perfectly placed bronze ram. The harbor smells like cedar, smoke, and coin. You've just stepped onto a wooden wharf, somewhere in Tyre, yes. That Tyre, the jewel of the Phoenician coast, where the ships are sleek, the sails dyed imperial purple, and the dock workers are suspiciously muscular for people who supposedly just load amphorae. It's early morning. Traders haggle in 5 languages. Sailors haul crates filled with glass, papyrus, wine, and gods know what else. And in a shaded alcove near a watchtower, shipwrights are hammering out the future of ancient naval combat. Welcome to the world of the Phoenicians' maritime geniuses, merchants of myth, and occasionally naval tacticians with very sharp tricks up their sleeves. You're not here for trade, though you're on loan, a mercenary, a sailor for hire, and today you're being sent out on a Carthaginian bireme, a sleeker, tougher cousin of the Greek trireme, built more for endurance than elegance. The captain is bald, sunburned, and speaks mostly in hand gestures. You like him already. Mainstream fact, the Phoenicians and their descendants in Carthage were unmatched shipbuilders in the ancient Mediterranean. Their hulls were renowned for their speed, their flexibility, and, most impressively, their layered hull construction using pegged mortise and tenon joints. You may not know what that means, but your feet sure. Notice the lack of leaks. Your ship casts off just before noon. The sea's as calm as it's going to get, and the wind pushes your sail like a whisper. You're not going into open battle today, more like shadow play. The Carthaginians didn't always win naval wars by brute force. They preferred ambushes, night strikes, and weaponized confusion. Somewhere behind you, a Roman convoy is expected, and your job, hit them before they know what hit them. The plans slip out from behind a rocky islet, ram the rearmost supply ship, then set fire to anything wooden. Elegant, unapologetic, so Carthaginian. A quirky tidbit for your troubles. Ancient Carthaginians sometimes greased their ship hulls with a mixture of pine tar, crushed seashells, and pulverized fish guts to improve glide and discourage sea worms. You know this because it now coats your tunic and also your breakfast. Excellent. The attack comes swift. Your ship glides into the gap just as the Roman escort ship drifts slightly off course. You can hear their crew shouting, but it's too late. Your bronze prow strikes mid-hull. The sound is awful, like splitting a log full of bones. Men fall. Others scream. You leap across, sword drawn, not for a noble duel, but to torch the cargo netting, cleave sail ropes, and cause maximum chaos in minimal time. Historians still argue whether the Phoenicians invented naval fire attacks, or if they borrowed and improved them from earlier Eastern techniques. What's clear is that Carthage had a particular flair for chemical warfare at sea resins that burned on water, bladders of oil launched from shipboard catapults, and even smoke bombs to blind and confuse. Today, it's simpler. Oil, cloth, flame. The Roman ship goes up fast. You fall back as your captain yells for retreat. No need to overstay. You've made your point. Your ship turns, disappearing into the maze of coastal inlets where Carthage hides its secrets. The Romans might call it cowardly. You call it clever. Back on shore, your crew drinks wine spiked with date juice. You lick salt from your lips and watch as merchants resume their business, like nothing happened. A fire on the horizon, just another Tuesday. Here's the thing, Carthaginian naval warfare was about disruption, not domination. They weren't trying to control the sea, just make it unpredictable for everyone else. between their spies in Greek ports, their secretive shipwrights, and their ability to appear where they weren't expected, they made every other fleet sleep with one eye open. You wander the docks at twilight. A boy runs past, carrying a squid in a basket. A woman sells salted fish beside a shrine to Baal, and in a quiet slip between two merchant ships, you see a new vessel being fitted with something strange, iron claws mounted on swivels. You ask a nearby sailor what they are, for grabbing things. He says, grinning, like your boat, or your soul. Noted, a Roman might scoff at this underhandedness. A Greek might call it dishonorable. But you're starting to appreciate the philosophy. Hit fast, hit smart, and never, ever fight fair. Especially on water, you're rowing with your whole body now, not just your arms, but your shoulders, your back, your legs, even your jaw clenched so tightly it might split your molars. The sun is high, the sea is glassy, and your Roman warship is moving like a sluggish cow. You feel every inch of this boat. You feel the weight of a civilization learning, the hard way, that you can't conquer the sea with sandals and spreadsheets. You're on a Roman, Kinkereme, one of the clunkiest, beefiest ships ever to bob across the Mediterranean. She's heavy, wide, and stacked with soldiers who look slightly confused about why the floor is moving. The ship groans like it's considering retirement. Mainstream fact, early Rome was not a naval power. Their strength came from the land roads, legions, supply chains, bureaucracy. But when war with Carthage dragged them into the First Punic War, the Romans had no choice. They captured a wrecked Carthaginian ship, reverse engineered it plank by plank, and ordered hundreds of copies. It's the ancient equivalent of building an air force by stealing one plane and hoping for the best. Historians still argue whether the Romans fully understood what they were getting into. Some sources say their first fleets were so poorly built they capsized in mild weather. Others argue they adapted quickly. Either way, their solution to not being great sailors was classic Roman make the sea behave like land. That's where the corvus comes in. The corvus is a boarding plank with a big old spike underneath. When enemy ships come close, you drop it onto their deck like a drawbridge from hell, then send your soldiers charging across. No, naval finesse, just infantry in sandals, swinging swords, shouting Latin. You test it today. Enemy ship in sight, another Carthaginian. Faster, more maneuvrable, already tacking into position. Your captain gives the order. You brace as the quinquereme lumbers forward. The corvus is rigged and ready. Crash. The ship rams imperfectly, more like a desperate nudge than a killing blow. But the corvus, it slams down with a satisfying thunk, skewering the enemy deck and locking your ships together, like two squabbling brothers who refuse to let go. Now it's a land battle, on a floating platform. You rush across with the others, shield up, sword raised. The Carthaginians aren't ready for this. Their sailors retreat, their marines engage, but they're outnumbered. You fight amid tar buckets and sailcloth, slipping on ropes, ducking under rigging. It's chaos. It's loud. It smells like blood and pitch, and it works. The Romans win, again, not because they're the best at sea, but because they turn every fight into something they are good at: brute force infantry combat, with a flair for engineering. A quirky tidbit: some of the earliest Roman sailors were landlubber farmers conscripted into service. During lulls, they tended to potted plants on deck, and sometimes tried growing herbs in buckets. It made the quinqueremes smell like basil and fear. You take a breath now. Sitting on the captured deck, the enemy ship smolders. Your comrades cheer with exhausted gusto. The corvus is hauled back with a screech. A ghoul lands beside you, snatches a dead man's ring, and flies off. That feels like an omen. You just don't know what kind. Later that night, as your ship drifts in formation with others, you eat barley bread and salted fish by lamplight. The moon glows over a horizon flecked with Roman sails. You're beginning to realize the sea won't stay unconquered for long. Rome adapts. They always do. Sure, they're not as poetic as the Greeks, or as slippery as the Carthaginians, but they're relentless. Their engineers invent new pulley systems to raise sails faster. Their admirals start drawing sea battle formations with the same pride they once reserved for legion placements. And eventually, slowly, steadily, they build a navy so large and so efficient that not even Carthage can keep up. You look around at the tired, sunburned crew, the grizzled centurion trying to teach a deckhand how to tie knots, the boy who still wears his father's boots, 5 sizes too big. They're not sailors, but they are Roman, and that's starting to mean something. You're hunched behind a curved wooden shield, knuckles white, eyes squinting through rising smoke. The ship creaks beneath you, not in pain, but in hunger, because this is no ordinary vessel. This is a Byzantine dromon, and it's about to breathe fire, literally. You've never seen anything like it. The prow is shaped like a snarling beast, and from its open mouth, a bronze tube juts forward. Like a tongue forged in a nightmare, crewmen crank pressurized bellows at the base. Shouting over the clash of waves and the groan of rigging, your captain mutters a prayer to St. Nicholas, the patron of sailors and probably arsonists by now. Welcome to Greek fire, the most terrifying weapon ever unleashed on the ancient seas. The enemy is close, Arab ships in tight formation, fast, nimble, confident. They've fought Roman fleets before and survived, but they haven't met this. The dromon lurches into range. The signal horn cries out like a wounded ox. You duck as the crewman lights the pipe, steps back, and whoomph, a jet of flame bursts forward, trailing smoke and shrieking like a banshee. It splashes across the sea and keeps burning, on the water, on the ships, on everything. You hear shouts turn to screams, and you want to look away, but you don't. You can't, because you're watching a new age of naval warfare ignite right in front of you. Mainstream fact: Greek fire was a closely guarded Byzantine state secret. No one, not the Arabs, not the Crusaders, not modern chemists, has ever fully figured out how it worked. Theories include petroleum, quicklime, sulfur, and even saltpeter. But all we know is that it stuck to surfaces and kept burning. Even on water, it was the medieval napalm of the seas. And today, it's yours. Your ship veers away as the enemy breaks formation. Fire blooming across sticks like evil flowers. Some leap into the sea, only to find the surface itself alight. Others cling to ropes that melt beneath their hands. You're sweating inside your armor, but your ship is untouched. Sails full and gliding past the chaos like a ghost. You look to the flame crew, 3 soot-covered men, who now smell like burnt sugar and judgment. They reload quickly, grunting in unison. The bronze siphon hisses as they test pressure. It's mechanical, almost mundane, but the fear it spreads divine. Historians still argue whether Greek fire was ever replicated after the 8th century, or if its secrets died with the imperial chemists. Some say it was passed down only from emperor to emperor, spoken aloud in a chapel during coronation. Others believe the formula was destroyed on purpose, too dangerous, even for its creators. But on this day, it's alive and hissing. A quirky tidbit to lighten the mood: some Byzantine manuals suggest storing Greek fire in sealed animal bladders and using them as grenades. The idea of sailing into battle with your tunic pockets full of explosive goat guts is honestly peak medieval energy. You regroup behind the main fleet. The enemy is in full retreat now, their ships trailing fire like wounded dragons. Your crew doesn't cheer. No one speaks. This wasn't a clean fight. It was a display, a message. The sea belongs to Constantinople now, and any ship foolish enough to challenge that will be met with fire and fury. At sunset, you dock beneath the Theodosian walls. The city gleams behind you, domes glowing gold in the fading light. You can still smell the flames. You can still hear the screams. And you understand something important. War has changed. You've fought with spears, with rams, with cunning and courage. But now you've seen technology tilt the scales, science in service of empire. And it doesn't ask your permission. You're handed a ration of wine and a crust of black bread. A priest blesses your hands. You're still shaking. He tells you that fire is cleansing. You don't argue. Tonight, you sleep in the shadow of a civilization that holds the sea by the throat. And tomorrow, you reload the siphon. You're not rowing today. You're raiding. The sun hasn't risen yet, but the sea glows with the ghostly silver of moonlight. And your small, narrow ship slices through the water like a whispered threat. You're sitting low in the hull, knees bent, axe at your side, and every crew member is wrapped in silence, part reverence, part focus, and part, please let this not be a trap. You're not sailing under a nation's flag. You're not part of any formal fleet. You're one of the lawless, the forgotten, the feared, a pirate, or maybe something older. Some might call you a sea person, though no one agrees exactly who they were. All you know is the next port is asleep, and by sunrise, it won't be. A sudden shift in the wind brings the smell of citrus trees. Close now. Your captain raises a hand. You slow, coast into a hidden cove. Oars lifted, not dragged. You listen, stillness, and then go. Feet splash into shallows. You sprint across sand and up a muddy trail. Weapons drawn. Torch in hand. The village is small, low huts. A pier, a few fishing boats. No fortifications. No warning. You move fast, overwhelming them before a rooster even thinks about crowing. It's brutal. It's quick. It's also over in minutes. Mainstream fact: piracy wasn't a side effect of ancient naval warfare. It was built into the system. Greek heroes like Odysseus were openly described as raiders. Roman ports were threatened by pirates for centuries. And in the late Bronze Age collapse, entire cities vanished under waves of coastal raiding by enigmatic seaborne groups, likely fragmented migrants, mercenaries, and opportunists, all operating without central command. Historians still argue whether the Sea Peoples were a single group or a loosely allied mass of desperate tribes. Egyptian records describe them with names like Sheridan, Lucca, and Peliset, some of which might eventually become Sardinians, Lycians, or Philistine, but their naval tactics, striking fast, traveling light, and leaving nothing behind, like you do tonight. You drag a few crates aboard grain, wine, a jar of fish paste that already smells like defeat. Your captain chuckles. He calls it profit. You call it survival, a quirky tidbit to rattle your oarlocks. Some pirate crews use coded songs to row in rhythm sea shanties, not just for morale, but for coordination. Each tune meant something different. Approach, retreat, turn left, stab someone. Tonight, you row in eerie silence, but the rhythm still pulses through your bones like a second heartbeat. The stars wheel above you now, distant and cold. Your ship pulls away, vanishing like mist. By the time the village wakes fully, you're already miles out to sea. You know they'll rebuild. They always do. That's the rhythm of life on a coast like this. Raid, rebuild, repeat. You rest, tucked beneath a sheepskin cloak, the hull creaking softly above. No hymns, no medals, just loot in the hold and bruises on your knees. Piracy isn't noble, but it's a kind of freedom. No taxes, no kings, no speeches, just the sea and what you can take from it before someone takes it from you. And yet, even here, in this rogue's life, you sense a kind of order, unwritten rules, rituals, superstitions. You never step onto a ship with your left foot first. You never speak the captain's name during storms. You always bring a coin for Sharon, just in case. There's something sacred about this lawlessness, something older than empire. A sailor's code carved not into stone tablets, but into the wind itself. At dawn, you pass a wrecked ship on the horizon, half submerged and picked clean by gulls. Could be pirate, could be merchant, could be tomorrow's you. You keep rowing anyway, because while navies rise and fall, the sea never picks sides. And the raiders, they always come back. The waves are soft tonight, almost too soft. Your ship bobs gently beneath a wide sky, scattered with stars. And there's nothing but water in all directions, black, endless, whispering secrets. No sails flap, no oars splash, just silence, and the quiet sound of a sailor muttering something under his breath. You're not in battle. You're in between ports, between storms, between wars. And that's when the real dangers begin, not from other ships, but from what lives in your head. Because here, surrounded by nothing but brine and sky, you start to understand naval warfare in the ancient world wasn't just about ships and fire and blood. It was about fear, deep, superstitious, bone-rattling fear. You roll onto your side and listen. The man beside you is whispering a charm to Pontus, god of the deep. Another sailor fingers a small amulet, a knucklebone carved into a dolphin. You remember how earlier today, someone refused to eat fish because the entrails twitched wrong. You laughed. They didn't. Mainstream fact. Ancient sailors, especially during long campaigns, were deeply religious and riddled with rituals. They believed that the ocean was a living force, moody, vengeful, easily offended. Before setting sail, Greek triremes held offerings to Poseidon, Amphitrite, or even local river gods. Roman naval officers often consulted augurs before major voyages. Sometimes, entire missions were delayed because a bird flew the wrong direction. But out here, it wasn't the gods you feared the most. It was the deep, storms, rogue waves, hidden rocks, sudden squalls that turned smooth water into crashing cliffs. You could go to sleep under stars and wake up clinging to driftwood. No matter how many spears you carried or how many men you had, the sea was never really yours. Historians still argue whether reports of sea monsters, krakens, serpents, giant fish with human eyes were just exaggerated sightings of whales and oarfish. But when you're watching the horizon blur into grey and something massive thumps the bottom of the hull, you don't stop to ask for scholarly consensus. You just grab a charm and you pray. A quirky tidbit: sailors on long voyages often created floating shrines on their ships, tiny altars made from driftwood and seashells, tucked into corners, hidden behind barrels. Some burned incense, some offered fish guts. One captain insisted on carrying a mummified rat in a pouch because he believed it warned him of leaks. It didn't, but no one dared throw it overboard. Tonight, your crew is especially restless. One man swears he saw a ghost ship on the horizon, sails shredded, no lights, gliding silently. Another swears he heard singing under the water. A third claims the stars aren't in the right place. You don't believe any of it, until you do, because as you lie there, head on a coil of rope, you feel something strange. The boat tilts just a little. No wind, no wave, just something, and then it rocks back. A crewman stirs. You all hold your breath. Nothing, just the sea. You exhale, and someone starts singing a low, humming chant in a language you don't understand. It's old, older than Greek, older than Carthage. The rhythm matches the waves. The others join in softly. No instruments, just voices. And just like that, the fear fades. You remember, you're not alone. You're part of something older than war. A tradition of sailors stretching back into mythmen who rode by starlight, fought under thunder, bled on planks, and still sang to the sea. Tomorrow, you might burn another ship, or sink, or see home, but for now, there's only the lullaby of the water, the creak of the hull, and the hush of men remembering they are small. And that's enough. Wind down, 300 words. The waves are gentler now, cradling the ship like a mother, rocking her child. The stars above seem softer too, glowing through a thin veil of cloud. Their light diffused like candle flame behind silk. You lie still. The chant has faded, but its rhythm remains in your bones. The ocean laps against the hull in a pattern that feels almost intentional, like breath or heartbeats. You close your eyes, and the world narrows to warmth, motion, and silence. The salt in the air is familiar now, no longer sharp, but comforting. It smells like memory, like nights spent watching distant lanterns on other ships, wondering who lit them and whether they burned out before dawn. You've traveled across empires and eras. You've stood on ships of every size and shape, rowed with Mycenaeans, rammed with Athenians, burned with Byzantines, and vanished with pirates. And now, here, at the end of this long voyage, you realize the sea always wins, but it also listens. So let yourself drift now. Let the water carry you. There are no more battles to fight tonight, no fire to dodge, no curses to fear, just the slow rise and fall of a wooden deck and the whisper of wind in worn canvas. You are safe, you are small, and the sea just for now has decided to hold you gently. Sleep well, sailor. You've earned your rest. End of script. Sweet dreams. Hey guys. Tonight, we begin somewhere, dusty hot, dry, and echoing with the bleats of restless goats. You're not in a palace. Not yet. You're in the rugged hill country of Anshan, in the land of Persis, where the winds are sharp and every shadow seems to carry a secret. The year, roughly 600 BCE, give or take a few lunar eclipses. And tonight, you're being born. Your name will be Cyrus. But not yet. For now, you're just a squirmy bundle of destiny wrapped in linen and watched far too closely by nervous eyes. Because here's the thing, your birth is already a problem. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where we all drift off from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not just any baby. You're born to Mandane, a Persian princess, and Cambyses, 80, a minor king of Anshan. But your grandfather is Astyages, of the king of the Medes, and he's not thrilled about this whole situation. Why? Because the court prophets have been whispering dreams, omens, and a terrifying prophecy. Your grandson will rise, overthrow you, and rule all Asia. Astyages isn't into that. So he does what any responsible ancient king would do, he tries to kill you. Mainstream fact, Astyages really did have a dream that his daughter's child would dethrone him. This dream is recorded by Herodotus, who says Astyages handed newborn Cyrus over to a court official with very specific instructions. Let's call it non-royal retirement. But here's where things get weird. Instead of leaving you on a mountainside, the courtier has a change of heart. He gives you to a humble herdsman and his wife, who agree to raise you as their own. You spend your early years believing you're just a shepherd's son running wild, herding goats, and throwing rocks at lizards. Historians still argue whether this story is mostly propaganda or rooted in some half-remembered truth. Some say the tale of the hidden royal child raised in secret was too good to resist. Others point to similar myths across cultures. Moses, Romulus, even Snow White. If you squint, a quirky tidbit, the herdsman's wife was reportedly pregnant at the time and had just lost her baby. So you, tiny Cyrus, were a convenient miracle. One screaming royal baby swapped in for one lost peasant child. Instant cosmic drama, but you're no ordinary child. Iunareitsen, you act kingly. When you play games with village boys, you assign roles, soldier, ministers, bodyguards, and, of course, you always play the king. One day, you get a little too into character and order the son of a nobleman whipped for disobeying your laws. That was a mistake. The nobleman storms off to Astyages and tells him some shepherd boy just gave his kid 50 lashes. Astyages investigates. It sees you. Something in your face. Those eyes. That jawline looks familiar. Do familiar. He calls in the courtier who killed you. The man sweats. The lies unravel. And just like that, the prophecy is back on the table. And yet, Astyages doesn't kill you. Maybe he's superstitious. Maybe he's tired. Maybe your 10-year-old attitude is just too iconic to end. Instead, he sends you back to Persia, to your biological parents. Now, minor royalty, and thinks maybe, just maybe, he's dodged fate. Spoiler, he hasn't. But for now, you're back where you belong. Sort of. You're not exactly a prince. You're not exactly a goat herder. You're something in between. And that makes you dangerous. You know the wilds. You know court etiquette. You've slept in dirt and silk, and you're already thinking bigger than any of them. The hills of Anshan glow gold in the morning light. You stretch. You breathe the dust of your childhood one more time, and you begin to imagine what it would feel like to rule, not just goats, not just Persia, but everything. You're 13 years old, and you're already plotting the end of kings. You're 17 now, and you've officially outgrown the goats. Your step is firmer. Your voice carries. Your shoulders fill your tunic. The shepherd's crook is long gone, traded in for sparring staffs, council meetings, and the wary stares of noblemen who aren't quite sure what to make of you. You're not their king. Not yet. But you're no one's servant. Either. You live at court now, in Anshan, under your father Cambyses, a quiet man who rules with just enough force to keep things from falling apart. He's a vassal under your grandfather, Astyages, king of the Medes, who still thinks he has everything under control. You haven't forgotten what he tried to do. You don't talk about it. You don't need to. You're watching, learning, planning. You join your father in audience halls and border skirmishes. You ride with messengers, share meals with merchants, and sleep under the stars with soldiers. You make friends in strange places, Persian clans who've always been second class under Median rule, ambitious nobles who see the storm on the horizon, and old warriors who tell you, quietly, they're ready when you are. Mainstream fact. Cyrus didn't inherit a fully independent kingdom. Persia at the time was under Median suzerainty, and Astyages still held the reins of real power. But as Cyrus matured, so did Persia's ambitions, and more importantly, its network of discontent. Historians still argue whether Cyrus planned his rebellion alone or whether a broad conspiracy had been simmering for years. Some say he was a calculating genius. Others suggest he was simply the right figure at the right time, elevated by factions, tired of playing second fiddle to the Medes. A quirky little detail. One version of the rebellion claims that Cyrus sent a dead hare stuffed with letters to allies across the region, sliced open and resewn, smuggled past checkpoints. What's more covert than a corpse? Especially one no one wants to poke. You stand at the edge of the Zagros Mountains one morning, wind tugging at your cloak, and feel it in your chest. Something's about to shift. You've been loyal long enough, played small long enough, and now the opportunity opens a crack in the mountain. Astyages makes a mistake. He sends his general, Harpagus, to put down your rising influence in Persia. But Harpagus, he hasn't forgotten what Astyages did years ago, forcing him to serve his own son as punishment for failing to kill you as an infant. Yes, that actually happened. We'll leave the details vague. Because bedtime, so Harpagus flips. Quietly, secretly, writes you letters, offers troops, coordinates from inside the belly of the beast. When the day comes, your rebellion doesn't feel like a civil war. It feels like destiny remembering itself. You raise your banner, not grand, not embroidered, just fabric and defiance. Persian clans rally. Median outposts hesitate. By the time Astyages realizes what's happening, and half his court has already sent you polite, unsigned notes of encouragement. Your father dies around this time, peacefully or not. No one knows. You don't have time to grieve. You're too busy marching. Your army moves fast, cutting through terrain with the speed of people who want to follow you. You're not rich. You're not even official. But you are Cyrus, and that's starting to mean something. The final battle is near Pasargadae. The Medes are dug in, but their heart isn't in it. They don't chant. They don't charge. Some of them don't even show up. You ride in at dawn, with dust in your teeth, and a grin that says, "Let's be honest. You saw this coming." And then it's over. You take Ecbatana, the Median capital. You don't sack it. You don't burn it. You incorporate it. You invite the nobles to dinner. You keep Harpagus close. You let Astyages live under supervision. He's not a threat anymore. Not really. You unite the Medes and the Persians under one rule. Your rule. It's the beginning of an empire. Not just a conquest. A merger. You don't erase what came before. You build on it. Layer by layer. You stand at the gates of a city that was once your enemy's. And now you say, "We'll need a bigger throne." Because this is just the start. And you're still warming up. The throne beneath you is comfortable. But your eyes are on the horizon. You've unified Persia and Media. But stability is never still. You've become something new. Something the world isn't quite ready for yet. A king who conquers but doesn't gloat. Who expands but doesn't crush. Who rules with discipline and restraint. You're still young. Still lean. Still riding with the front lines. But now your army marches for something more than revenge. It marches for Cyrus the Great, and it marches west. Your next target, Lydia. A glittering kingdom, rich with gold, horses, and a famously wealthy king named Croesus. Yes, the same Croesus who gave the world the phrase "as rich as Croesus." He's powerful, charming, and very confident in his Delphic horoscope. You see, Croesus has consulted the oracle of Delphi about attacking you. She told him, if you cross the river Halys, a great empire will fall. Classic oracle mischief. Croesus assumed the empire that would fall was yours. Spoiler, it wasn't. You crossed the Halys first. Mainstream fact. The war between Cyrus and Croesus took place around 547 BCE. Lydia was famed, not just for its wealth minting some of the first standardized gold coins, but also for its cavalry and deep alliances. Croesus called on Egypt and Babylon. He expected a long campaign. He got a wake-up call. Your army meets his on the plains near Thimbra. His cavalry charges. Your infantry holds. But here's the twist: you brought camels. Not for riding, but for spooking horses. Lydia's prized cavalry panics. The battlefield turns into a giant, confused mess of gold-trimmed chaos. Your forces press the advantage. Croesus retreats to Sardis, the Lydian capital. You follow. The city walls are tall, proud, and famously impregnable, except for one tiny detail. A soldier in your army spots a Lydian guard accidentally drop his helmet over the wall, then scurry down a hidden footpath to retrieve it. Congratulations. You found the secret back entrance. You send a small force up that same path under cover of night. Sardis falls. Lydia becomes yours. You take Croesus alive. You could kill him, but you don't. You sit with him, listen to his stories, even keep him on as an advisor. Some versions say you spared him after he cried out to Solon, the Athenian sage, about how no man should be called happy until the end of his days. You listen, and you learn. Historians still argue whether Croesus truly became your advisor, or if that's more legend than fact. But the idea of you absorbing, not just conquering your enemies, becomes part of your reputation. You don't razatitis. You recruit them. You don't humiliate kings. You hire them, a quirky tidbit. Some say that as Sardis burned, you ordered the fire doused after Croesus cried out to Apollo, and a sudden storm rolled in to extinguish the flames. Divine intervention, convenient weather. You wink and say, yes. Now, with Lydia under your control, you gain access to its wealth, its coinage, and more importantly, its western ports. You now touch the Aegean Sea. The Greeks are watching. Some tremble, some scoff. You don't move against them yet. Instead, you turn to the next piece of the empire puzzle, Babylon. But first, you build. You establish Pasargadae, your ceremonial capital, a blend of Persian strength and Median elegance. You walk its gardens, oversee its terraces, and lay the foundations for what will become the beating heart of your growing empire. It's modest, but refined, efficient, functional. You're not building for glory, you're building for endurance. You keep your generals busy. You train scribes, standardize roads, and send messengers like arrows across provinces. You're not just making war, you're making infrastructure, and you're doing it with a calm intensity that unnerves your enemies. They expected a conqueror. They got an organizer. At night, you study maps by firelight. Lydia is quiet. Persia thrives. But Babylon waits, and you're ready to meet it. The sun is harsher out here, less golden, more merciless. You're far from the palaces now, deep in the eastern steppe, where the wind never stops, and the horizon rolls endlessly forward like a dare. You've traded banquet halls for saddlebags, scribes for scouts, and the scent of incense for the sting of horse sweat and dust. You're not surrounded by courtiers. You're surrounded by warriors, and they're all waiting to see if the king still has it. Spoiler, you do. You're riding against the Massagetae, fierce nomadic tribes led by Queen Tamiris, a ruler, as proud as she is tactically ruthless. She doesn't fear you, not your armies, not your title, not even your legacy. She rules a people who sleep under stars and drink fermented mare's milk, whose children ride before they walk, and whose warriors are not interested in coins or kings. Mainstream fact, in 530 BCE, Cyrus launched a campaign against the Massagetae, a confederation of eastern Iranian tribes beyond the Jaxartes River, modern-day Sirdaria. It would be his final campaign, and whether it was hubris, necessity, or unfinished business, he rode out himself, just as he always had. Historians still argue whether Cyrus underestimated the Massagetae or simply got unlucky. According to Herodotus, he first tried to outwit them, setting up a banquet with wine and rich food, retreating, and letting a segment of the Massagetae stumble upon it. They ate, drank, slept. Cyrus attacked. It worked. For about 5 minutes. The problem, that segment, included Tamiris's son, who was captured, then died, either by suicide or execution, depending on who's telling the story. Now it's personal, a quirky and brutal tidbit. Tamiris, after the final battle, allegedly found Cyrus's corpse, severed his head, and dunked it in a skin full of blood, saying, "You thirsted for blood, drink your fill." It's dramatic, poetic, possibly apocryphal, but then again, it's not like you're around to deny it. The truth is, you knew this one might not go your way, and still, you went. You had Babylon, you had Lydia, You had Media, Persia, the highlands and the sea, but you couldn't sit still. You couldn't fade into ceremony. You had to see the edge of your empire, touch it, push it, maybe de-on it, because you weren't made for marble halls. You were made for movement. The final battle is a blur, dust, screams, arrows that whisper death before they strike. You fight at the front, like always. You bleed, like always. But this time, the wound runs deeper. Your soldiers rally. They try to recover your body. They do or they don't. The stories change, depending on who's telling them. Some say you were buried where you fell. Others say you were brought home. But most agree that your body ends up in Pasargadae, the capital you founded, laid to rest in a modest stone tomb, a rectangular platform with a gabled roof, plain, solid, eternal, and on it, a simple inscription: "O man, I am Cyrus, who founded the empire of the Persians and was king of Asia. Do not grudge me this piece of earth that covers my body. No gold, no statue, no divine acclaim, just a whisper in stone. That's your style. Really, you didn't declare yourself a god. You didn't demand a pyramid. You ruled with vision, not vanity. Your greatness was carved not in monuments, but in systems in tolerance, justice, diplomacy. You didn't erase the world you conquered. You connected it. Now, the riders return to Pasargadae. The banners dip low. The satraps meet in quiet council. And across a continent, the people pause. They don't panic, because you left them more than a name. You left them a blueprint. The throne is empty now, but the empire remains seated. You're gone, buried beneath that slab of stone in Pasargadae. But somehow your presence stretches wider than it ever did in life. Roads still run, couriers still gallop, governors still govern, even your enemies well. Most of them refer to you with a mixture of respect and confusion, because they didn't expect you to work. You weren't supposed to succeed. You weren't born into greatness. You weren't the most brutal, or the most brilliant, or even the most intimidating. But you were different. You didn't just build an empire, you designed one. Mainstream fact: after your death in 500 BCE, your son Cambyses II took over the throne without civil war, without massive upheaval. That alone speaks volumes. Succession crises were the default for most kingdoms in the ancient world, but you'd set up a system that ran well enough without you, which may be the greatest power trick of all. You trained your sons. You planted loyalty. You didn't rule from fear. You ruled from structure. Satraps. Remember those provincial governors. You gave them authority, but kept them answerable. You created a network of spies, the king's eyes and ears, to check corruption. Not because you were paranoid, because you were realistic. Absolute power invites absolute nonsense. And you made sure someone was always watching the watchers. Historians still argue whether this spy network was as organized as later records suggest, or if it became more formalized under your successors, like Darius. But its roots, definitely yours. You ruled like a father expecting to be outlived by a very complicated household. A quirky tidbit in Babylon. After you allowed the Jewish people to return to Jerusalem, you were honored in scripture. In fact, the book of Isaiah refers to you as God's anointed, the only non-Jew in the entire Bible to get that title. That's right, the Persians may not have thought you were divine, but someone clearly did. Your laws didn't force conversion. Your cities weren't named after you. You didn't plop golden statues of yourself everywhere, like certain pharaohs we won't name. You let people be, as long as they played by the empire's rules. And the empire was smart. You standardized coinage without destroying local trade. You kept languages diverse, but installed Aramaic as an administrative lingua franca. You encouraged infrastructure over monuments. Your roads weren't for parades. They were for information. For messengers who could ride from Susa to Sardis faster than most people could pack a tent. You didn't call yourself the Great. Others did, and now they all want a piece of you. The Greeks look at your life and start comparing kings to you, usually unfavorably. Herodotus, who loved a juicy backstory, mixes admiration with caution when writing about you. You weren't a tyrant. You weren't a hero. You were something harder to define, something trickier, a leader who didn't fit the mold. And yet, you weren't flawless. Some say you should have stayed in Babylon. Others whisper that your campaign against the Massagetae was a prideful mistake. Some provinces chafed under your taxation. Others never fully accepted your son's rule. But then again, show us one perfect empire. You get remembered not just for what you did, but for what you didn't do. You didn't raise cities for fun. You didn't crush cultures. You didn't build your legacy on bones. And when people rebelled, you didn't always answer with a sword. Sometimes, you sent a letter, or a marriage offer, or just better roads. You wander the halls of memory now, not as a ghost, but as a symbol, a model for what power might look like if it listened, if it learned, if it grew with grace. You're not just a name etched in stone. You're a pattern, and long after your body returns to dust, the world keeps tracing it. The desert wind still sings across your tomb. Pasargadae hasn't grown much since you left. It isn't grand. It doesn't need to be. The stone structure you rest beneath remains simple, 6-stepped platforms, a rectangular chamber, and a gabled roof. No towering statues, no gilded inscriptions, no marble gods flanking the stairs. Just you and silence. You've become a rumor in the best way, a name passed between kings, a blueprint clutched by empire builders, a measuring stick for rulers who wonder what it would mean to govern well instead of just long. Even Alexander the Great, centurie la terre, will come here to your tomb. He'll dust off the doorway, post guards around it, leave offerings, because even he especially, he knows he's standing in the shadow of someone greater. Mainstream fact, when Alexander reached Pasargadae in 330 BCE, he visited your tomb, read its inscription, and was reportedly overcome with emotion. Some say he wept. Others say he ordered it restored after it had been looted. He called you king, not conqueror, not tyrant, just king. That's how far your reach has stretched. Across dynasties, across gods. Historians still argue whether your humility was strategic or sincere, whether the plainness of your tomb was a personal request or a cultural quirk, whether you were more politician or prophet. But the outcome, that's not in question. You changed what it meant to rule. A quirky, quiet legacy, your empire. After absorbing so many people, developed an early postal system, a kind of pony express on steroids. Relay riders at outposts every 15 miles. Neither snow nor rain, and so on. Sound familiar? It should. The modern postal service still borrows from the formula, your empire lives on in strange places. It hides in coin designs, in legal codes, in urban planning manuals, in UN speeches, quoting your cylinder, in the cracked steps of your tomb, where pilgrims, historians, and curious travelers still come to wonder how one man managed to win so many wars without becoming a monster. You didn't shout. You didn't demand. You simply moved forward, and the world shifted with you. You're gone now, but not in the usual way. You didn't vanish. You diffused into lore, into myth, into memory. Your enemies outlived you, but your ideas, they didn't just survive. They grew, wind down 300 words. The winds across the plains slow to a hush. The heat of the day retreats, leaving only warmth trapped in stone, and a faint rustling in the cypress trees planted beside your tomb. You stand there in stillness, not as king or soldier, not as ruler or rebel, but as someone who saw the future before it arrived. The desert no longer roars, it murmurs, and your empire no longer marches. It echoes. You've traveled from humble hills to golden capitals, from battles with nomads to quiet decrees etched in clay. And now, your journey has returned you to rest, not in gold, not in opulence, but in stone, modest, enduring. You lived with vision, you died with dignity, and tonight, you are remembered with calm. So let the world fade now, let the dust settle, let your breath slow to match the rhythm of wind-worn stone and timeless sky. You are part of history's soft exhale, no longer moving, yet never quite still. Sleep now, great king, the empire holds, and your name quietly, gently still carries across the sands. End of script. Sweet dreams. Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where your hairstyle wasn't just about looking good, it was about survival, status, and sometimes straight up sorcery. Imagine the hot sun blazing over the ancient sands of Egypt. You walk into a crowded temple courtyard, the air thick with incense and gossip. Heads turn, but not because you're late. No. It's because your hair's not right. It's flat, unstyled, and worse, unpowdered. In this world, your locks are your social currency, your divine signal, your personal brand. And just so you know, you probably wouldn't survive this fashion police state of 3000 BCE if the desert heat didn't get you. The judgmental side-eyes from the high priestesses would. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time. It is always fun to see who's dreaming along with us. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start in ancient Egypt, a place where the Nile whispers secrets, and the sun doesn't take weekends off. Hair here is less about vanity and more about divine alignment. If you're a high-status woman, your hair is likely tucked beneath an elaborate wig, thick, braided, perfumed, maybe even dyed with indigo or henna. It's not just for show. That wig is your resume, your relationship status, your place on the social pyramid, and underneath it, a shaved head, because lice are real, and the Nile Delta does not play. The Egyptians pioneered the wig industry long before your favorite cosplay channel even thought about it. They used human hair, palm fibers, and sometimes, because luxury always finds a way, threads of gold. Royal wigs were massive and heavy, layered in elaborate coils that shouted, "Yes, I have time and servants to do this every morning." Men, oh, they got in on the action too. Priesthood meant being completely shaved head, face, body, even eyebrows. That smooth look wasn't just hygienic, it was sacred. You remove hair to remove impurity. You step into temples, hairless, because the gods don't deal with dandruff. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, you're in the bustling streets of Ur or Babylon, and things get hairy literally. Beards are the main event. Not just, I forgot to shave today beards. We're talking cascading, oiled, and intricately curled chin art. There are entire grooming manuals passed down by scribes. If your beard doesn't form tight symmetrical ringlets, are you even trying? Elite men used heated curling irons, scented oils, and get this, beard stylists. Yes, your job might have been to spend an hour each morning sculpting a nobleman's facial topiary, being clean-shaven. Meanwhile, signaled servitude, or mourning. Beard equals status. Beard equals masculinity. Beard equals, please don't challenge me to a duel unless your curls can compete. But here's the plot twist. Women in Mesopotamia weren't left behind in the style game. They dyed their hair with henna or crushed minerals and adorned it with ribbons, beads, or small bronze pins. One uncovered statue from Nineveh shows a noblewoman's hair woven into crown-like shapes with actual lapis lazuli stones tucked inside. You try walking through the market like that and not catching a jealous eye or two. Now, slide further east, and the Indus Valley comes into focus. Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, where hair seems a little less preserved in the archaeological record, but still tells a story. Female figurines often have tight buns or heavy braids cascading down the back. One even has her hair wrapped around her forehead in a band that doubles as a headpiece. Functional and fashionable, like ancient dry shampoo, minus the chemicals and Instagram ads. Historians still argue whether these buns and braids were purely practical for working in hot climates or whether they carried religious or marital symbolism. Could be both, or neither. Maybe it was just a great hair day. Then there's the Hittites, tucked up near what's now Turkey. The men here are sometimes depicted with shoulder-length waves, thick and slightly wild, kind of like you just walked out of an ancient battle, but still remembered to condition. Women are drawn with thick plaits or even layered veils, their hair peeking out in controlled chaos. And don't forget about ancient China's Shang dynasty, where hair was often tied high and tight. Commoners wore simpler buns, but nobles and royalty think gravity-defying top knots, laced with jade combs and silk cords. One fringe tidbit: some nobles may have believed certain hairstyles channeled chi, or a life force, more effectively. Whether or not your bangs were boosting your spiritual Wi-Fi is anyone's guess. One mainstream fact that threads through all of this across nearly every early civilization: hair wasn't just fashion, it was function, faith, and flex. Whether you were curling, oiling, weaving, or shaving, your hair helped others decode who you were and who you wanted them to think you were. And sometimes, if you got it wrong, the consequences weren't just social. You could be demoted. You could be punished. You could even brace yourself be publicly shaved. In ancient Greece, for example, that would come later. But the idea existed early: to remove someone's hair was to remove their identity. So as you float through the twilight streets of ancient cities, torches flickering and sandals scuffing against stone, keep an eye on every braid and bun. It's not just a style, it's a statement. And you've got some serious hair envy. Just wait until you hear how Africa's ancestral braid game puts the rest of the world to shame. You wake up in a different heat, now not the dry desert of Egypt, but the humid, sun-drenched savannas, and deep forest regions of ancient Africa. The air is thicker here, more fragrant, buzzing with crickets and the hum of a dozen languages. And as you stretch and blink your sleepy eyes, one thing becomes immediately, beautifully clear. Nobody here is rolling out of bed with messy hair, not unless they want to start a family-level scandal. Tonight, you find yourself in a time long before colonial maps deep in the heart of West Africa, around 500 BCE, or maybe even earlier. You're surrounded by the people of the Nok culture, or perhaps the Demon Kingdom in the Horn of Africa, and whether you're in the dry Sahel or among the red clay villages near the equator, one thing remains consistent. Hair here is sacred, strategic, spectacular. Braids aren't just a style, they're a language. And every twist, cornrow, or knot in a woman's or man's hair tells a full story. Maybe it reveals her tribe, her marital status, her social rank, her spiritual beliefs, or even that she's in mourning. It's not just aesthetics, it's identity, threaded into place by hands that have memorized these patterns through generations. You sit cross-legged, while your aunt, yes, everyone has an aunt here, dips her fingers in a little mixture of shea butter and tree bark powder. She begins braiding, and each tug of the hair is rhythmic, like the drumming you hear from the village square. You might spend hours here, or even the whole day, and no one rushes, because hair time is sacred time. You're passing on gossip, history, jokes, even flirting codes, all while locking these symbolic designs into your scalp. One mainstream fact historians agree on in many African societies: hairstyles functioned as GPS. They told others where you were from before you opened your mouth. In the ancient Manda-speaking communities, for example, warriors wore bold upward-pointing styles, while spiritual healers might twist their hair downward or cover it entirely. Women ready to marry had one braid arrangement, widows had another. Even children had distinct patterns. You could literally read someone's life with your eyes. But here's a fringe tidbit that feels straight out of a movie plot. In some West African societies during the transatlantic slave trade centuries later, it's believed that women braided escape maps into their hair. Roads, river paths, hidden messages. Imagine smuggling resistance and rebellion in your cornrows, your head becoming a living scroll of survival. Now float back again farther back, because the roots of this practice reach deeper than most textbooks admit. While archaeological evidence of actual hair is rare in humid climates, ancient sculptures and terracotta figures found in places like Igbo UKWU or Mali's inland Niger Delta show stunningly detailed hair. One ceramic head shows zigzagging cornrows pulled tight along the scalp and flaring out at the nape, probably the equivalent of saying, "Yes, I'm elite. And yes, I know I look good." Men didn't get a pass either. Hairstyles for men range from coiled knots, arranged in mathematically perfect rows, to shaved geometric patterns cut with blades of stone or bronze. In certain societies, warriors wore horned shapes made from tightly woven hair, part style, part intimidation tactic. Imagine going into battle with your hair forming literal horns. You win before the fight even starts. Historians still argue whether some of these hairstyles served more than identity, possibly working as spiritual antennae. That's right. Some believe certain styles were thought to enhance communication with ancestors or nature spirits. Depending on the direction of the braids or the materials used in the hairdressing, it might sound out there, but in cultures where the physical and spiritual world constantly overlap, it's not such a stretch. You walk through a market in an ancient Yoruba city. maybe Ila Ife, where carved ivory combs are displayed like prize swords. Some are ceremonial, reserved for brides or festivals, but others are daily tools passed down through generations, like sacred instruments. They're not just for detangling, they're carved with messages, symbols, and sometimes tiny notches counting blessings or births. Now pause and listen to the soft buzz of conversation among a circle of women beneath a shade tree. You recognize that braiding is not done in isolation. It's social, comunal, the equivalent of a salon meets support group. This is where deals are struck. Alliances are formed, and children learn not just language, but lineage. One small joke you overhear is timeless. A young woman complaining her boyfriend tried to braid her hair and gave her spaghetti roots. Even 2,000 years ago, the DIY fail was alive and well. In the Horn of Africa, you encounter the Axumite elite, where long, ropey locks are twisted into crown-like arrangements, sometimes secured with copper pins or thin leather straps. High-ranking women here may spend half the morning being styled by servants, using wooden tools polished smooth from years of use. Sometimes these women dust their hair with perfumed powders, the scent trailing behind them like a whisper, and you, still sitting there, in the half-finished style, realize something else. Hair isn't just personal, it's political. When cultures were conquered, or tribes displaced, one of the first things done to suppress identity was to cut or control the hair. Removing a person's style erased part of who they were. And when people resisted, by preserving their ancestral hairstyles in secret, that was revolution. So you keep your head still, your back straight, and your heart open. Because every braid being woven into your scalp right now, it's a thread in a massive tapestry, a story that outlives even the sharpest blade. And just wait till you oil it, shake it loose, and strut into ancient Athens. The Greeks, oh, they've got opinions and a lot of olive oil. You emerge from the steamy haze of Africa and step into the crisp, sunlit world of ancient Greece. Marble statues glint in the daylight. Fig trees rustle above tiled courtyards, and there's a soft murmur of philosophical debate floating through the air. You've just landed in the city-state of Athens, around the 5th century BCE, and surprise you're underdressed, under-oiled, and your hair is suspiciously matte. Here, hair isn't just a look, it's an aesthetic philosophy. It must gleam like Apollo's chariot wheels, and fall like poetry across your shoulders. And if you're a man, you'd better believe your curls are making a political statement. Let's start with the Greek men. You stroll past a symposium, a sort of ancient bro hangout where wine flows and Plato pontificates, and every dude there seems to have the same artful, tousled curls. Not messy, not structured, just accidentally perfect. That's no accident. These men have carefully curled their hair with bronze rods, anointed it with olive oil, and probably said a tiny prayer to Aphrodite, for good measure. Long hair in this era meant aristocracy. If your hair was cropped short, you were probably a slave or a soldier. Young men, especially, wore shoulder-length locks tied back with ribbon headbands called tainii. Think varsity team captains with ancient scrunchies. But once they reached adulthood, boom, haircut time. It marked the transition into civic responsibility. You now get to vote and worry about taxes. Historians still argue whether the famous Greek philosophers, like Socrates or Pythagoras, wore their hair long in rebellion against strict grooming norms, or whether they just couldn't be bothered. You know Socrates wasn't brushing his curls before court appearances. Or was he? The jury's out, and possibly napping. Meanwhile, women in ancient Greece were running their own elite salon scene. High-born women rarely wore their hair down in public. That was for private life, intimate settings, or scandalous statuary. In public, hair was tied up in complex arrangements, buns stacked high, braids twisted around the head like halos, and sometimes long ringlets spilling from under a veil. One popular style was the krobolos, a sort of twisted topknot often accessorized with netting or gold-threaded cords. You see a young noblewoman in the agora, and her hairdo probably took 2 servants and 1 philosophical crisis to complete. You also notice how her hair smells faintly of lavender and myrrh. Ancient Greece may not have had shampoo, but they understood the power of aromatics. Hair was washed with lye soap, rinsed with herbs, and perfumed with oils so rich they doubled as currency. Now here's a cheeky side note. Some Greek women used crushed charcoal to darken their hair, or even dyed it red with henna, though that shade was often associated with courtesans. So if your hair suddenly screams pomegranate fire, people might whisper, "You walk into a temple to Athena," and even the statues are flaunting next-level hair. Each chiseled curl tells you this goddess doesn't skip salon day. Mythology itself is full of hair symbolism, Medusa's serpents. For one, take the whole bad hair day concept to mythic extremes. Let's slide forward a few centuries and over to Rome, where the hair game turns extra. The Romans inherited a lot from the Greeks' language roots. Gods, with new names. Togas, but when it came to hair, they took it up 10 notches and added imported wigs. By the 1st century CE, wealthy Roman women were stacking their hair in towering styles that defied logic and gravity. Imagine braids coiled like cinnamon rolls, teased into sculptural buns, then decorated with pearls, gold pins, and the occasional tiny sculpture. These were called tuculi, or nodus styles. Some even required wireframes and slave stylists, trained specifically in hair architecture. Yes, architecture. You sit down next to a Roman matron who is having her hair done by her ornatrix, her personal hairdresser, and she gives you a once-over. Your curls are fine, but basic. Her hair, meanwhile, looks like it has its own Senate seat. One mainstream historical fact: the Romans were obsessed with hair color. Blonde wigs were imported from Germania, red from the Celts, and black from India. Roman ladies swapped wigs like accessories and stored them in special boxes. If you were wealthy, you had a wig wardrobe. Poorer women dyed their hair with goat fat and beechwood ash, which sounds like something you'd regret the moment it touched your scalp. Meanwhile, Roman men prided themselves on neatly cropped hair and beards. Those styles shifted wildly depending on who was emperor. Augustus favored clean-shaven looks. So suddenly, every senator's face looked like a smooth marble statue. But along comes Hadrian, with his full beard. And suddenly it's rugged chic again. Beard trends were political. If you didn't match the imperial fashion, you risked looking like an opposition, sympathizer, or worse, outdated. A quirky tidbit: Emperor Nero supposedly had a special water clock to time how long his hairstylist took to curl each lock. That's right, your toxic manager could never. The streets of Rome were filled with barbershops, or tonstrine, where men gathered not just to get trimmed, but to share gossip, discuss politics, and judge each other's sideburns. These were social spaces, with sharp objects, never a great combo, and more than one debate ended in a literal close shave. And then there's the matter of slaves. Enslaved individuals often had their hair cut short to mark their status, though some female slaves were styled elaborately as a reflection of their owner's wealth. Think of them as walking advertisements, a cruel and complex symbol of power dynamics embedded in every curl. Historians still debate whether elaborate female hairstyles in Rome were always voluntary, or if societal pressure left no choice. After all, if your hair wasn't immaculate, people assumed you were lazy, immoral, or gasp a Greek. So, as you walk past a reflecting pool and catch a glimpse of your own shimmering, slightly olive-oiled reflection, you realize that in ancient Greece and Rome, your hair isn't just a vibe. It's philosophy, it's class, it's political alignment, and sometimes it's just showing off. And as the breeze shifts and the moon rises, you're about to find out what happens when hair isn't just about looks, but becomes a literal vessel for the sacred. The wind hushes, the torches dim, and now you step barefoot into the threshold between the human and the divine. You've left behind the chatter of Roman salons and the hot oil of Athenian barber shops. Tonight, your path leads into sacred spaces, temples, deserts, monasteries, places where hair stops being social and starts being spiritual. It begins with silence and scissors. You're in ancient India now, and the air is thick with incense. Cowbells echo softly in the distance, and the sacred Ganges flows like a liquid prayer. A young boy sits cross-legged in the dust, eyes closed, while a priest slowly shaves his head. Not all of it, just most. One small tuft, called a shikha, remains at the crown. It's tied tight, neat, and deliberate. In Hinduism, this top knot isn't a style statement. It's a symbol of spiritual focus. It's believed to be the spot where energy flows most directly into the mind. A literal antenna to the divine. Brahmins, or priests, grow it from childhood and never cut it unless in deep mourning or penance. You can feel the ritual in your bones, the scraping of the blade, the hum of the chants, the absolute seriousness of hair as a sacred offering, and you realize this isn't limited to one corner of the world. Now you're in ancient Israel, standing in a tented tabernacle as a Nazarite steps forward. His hair is long, wild, uncut for years. Nazarites, men or women, took a vow, often temporary, swearing not to cut their hair, drink wine, or touch anything unclean. You're witnessing the end of one such vow. As part of the ritual, the man's long hair is shaved off and burned beneath an altar. Fire curls it into smoke, rising up to the heavens like a whispered promise. Historians still argue whether this rite was borrowed from older nomadic practices or developed entirely within early Hebrew society. Either way, the message is clear. Hair isn't just decoration. It's devotion. You grow it for God. You offer it as sacrifice. You don't make hair decisions lightly. Slide north and further into the desert winds, and you find yourself among the early Christian monastics, those strange, rugged souls who retreated from Rome's decadence to fast, pray, and occasionally befriend lions in caves. These early monks often shave their heads in an odd, unsettling ring. It's called the tonsure, and it made them look, frankly, like a bowl haircut gone sideways. But the look had a purpose. The circular bald patch represented humility and separation from worldly life. Some say it symbolized the crown of thorns. Others argue it was simply meant to mark the monk as different as claimed by God. Either way, you wouldn't mistake a monk for a senator at the tavern. Funny detail. Different regions fought over which tonsure was correct. The Celtic Christians had one style, the Roman monks had another. Yes, religious leaders argued about monk hairstyles for literal centuries. Imagine convening a holy council to vote on bangs in ancient Japan. Meanwhile, you enter a Shinto shrine where a young Miko, or shrine maiden, ties her long black hair with a red ribbon before stepping into ritual dance. In Shinto, purity is everything. The hair must be clean, uncut, and uncovered during sacred rites. Washing one's hair before entering a shrine wasn't just hygiene, it was a spiritual cleanse. The more unbound the hair, the more open the spirit. But now you follow a different scent, burning juniper and roasted barley. You're deep in the steppes, wrapped in thick furs, watching a Mongolian shaman prepare for a night ritual. Her hair is braided in a way that mimics eagle feathers, layered down her back like wings. You ask quietly, "Why the feathers?" She doesn't answer. She just stares at the stars. Among many nomadic tribes, shamans believed hair could hold spiritual power, literal memory. To cut it meant losing protection or ancestral connection. Before major rituals, hair might be anointed with oil or painted with clay to signal transformation. Some styles were meant to attract helpful spirits. Others warned off demons. Your scalp starts tingling, just imagining the pressure. One quirky tidbit: some Siberian shamans reportedly refused to comb their hair for months before a vision quest, believing that tangles made it easier for spirits to nest in the strands. You think about the last time you had bedhead and wonder if you were just a little too spiritually open. Back in Mesoamerica, you sit with the ancient Maya, watching a priestess prepare for a ceremony. Her hair is wrapped in scarlet threads and shaped into a coil, meant to mimic the glyph for flower, a sacred symbol of life and death. Some hieroglyphic texts suggest that in moments of intense grief or war, Maya women would cut their hair and bury it with offerings. Air, once again, becomes something alive, something to be honored, or surrendered. One mainstream fact across nearly all these cultures, when it comes to grief, hair is among the first things offered. People shave their heads to mourn the dead, to mark captivity, or to enter a new religious life. Think of it as the original reset button. Your hair carried emotional weight, and cutting it meant letting go of sorrow, of ego, of the old self. And maybe that's why the act of covering the head became just as powerful. In ancient Persia, Zoroastrian priests wore head wraps to preserve ritual cleanliness. In early Islam, women and men alike covered their hair as a sign of modesty and piety. In Judaism, married women traditionally covered their hair with scarves or wigs called shaitels, maintaining modesty and drawing a visible line between public and private life. Historians still argue whether the earliest religious veils emerged from cultural traditions or scriptural mandates, but what's undeniable is that hair, whether shown, hidden, or sacrificed, always carried meaning far beyond the follicle. And you, walking slowly now through this gallery of sacred strands, start to feel the hum in your own scalp, as if your hair, no matter how modern or unruly, is listening, remembering, wondering what stories it tells when no one's watching. The temple doors are closing, but don't panic. You're not done yet. Next up, you're heading into royal courts and rebellion salons, where scissors are sharper than swords, and hairstyles literally start wars. You open your eyes, and find yourself standing in a throne room stone cold, echoing with footsteps, and heavy with perfume and paranoia. You've landed in the world of queens, kings, pharaohs, and emperors. And tonight, the scissors are not just for styling, they're for declaring power, cementing control, and, occasionally, taking revenge. Welcome to the high-stakes drama of royal hairstyles, where one wrong snip could cost your head. Metaphorically, or not, you're back in Egypt. But this time, not among ordinary nobles. You're in Cleopatra's private chamber. Yes, that Cleopatra, she's reclining on cushions, her hair being combed and coiled into those signature tight rows. She wears a fringe style that would make even modern influencers pause mid-selfie. Every strand is intentional. Her hair shaped like a thick, sleek bob, with long, beaded extensions, wasn't just beauty. It was political branding. Her look helped blur her Greek Macedonian roots and fuse her image into the native Egyptian goddess Isis. And here's a mainstream fact. Cleopatra didn't just wear these styles for fun. She did it to manipulate public image, unify cultures, and intimidate rivals. Her hair was part crown, part costume, part calculated cultural camouflage. But Cleopatra's not the only one, playing 4D chess with a comb. Jump to Assyria, around the 8th century BCE, and you're looking at relief carvings of King Ashurbanipal, with an epic beard so detailed, it looks like it came from a boutique salon in Brooklyn. Each curl, each wave, speaks power. Royal barbers in Assyria were so trusted. They were often eunuched to remove any possible threat to the king. Imagine your stylist holding the royal scissors and the state's secrets. A fringe detail, some kings reportedly traveled with their own portable grooming tents, complete with attendants trained specifically in wartime hairstyling. Picture a battlefield break, just to touch up your curls. Vanity, no. Visual domination. But sometimes, hair wasn't grown to show power, it was taken to strip it away. You're in ancient China now, kneeling before the emperor's court. During the Han Dynasty, a deposed noblewoman has her hair publicly cut snip. Snip, and you watch as her braid hits the polished stone floor. The silence in the room could split stone. In China, especially among the Han and later dynasties, hair was considered a sacred gift from one's parents. Cutting, it was not just dishonor, it was a form of symbolic death. Historians still argue whether these punishments were purely cultural or influenced by earlier animist beliefs in the sanctity of the body. But one thing's certain: to cut someone's hair without consent was like erasing their name from history. Now shift to medieval Japan, where samurai glide past in lacquered armor. Their heads are partially shaved in a style called chonmage, the rest tied into a top knot. That little tuft isn't just a nod to battlefield fashion. It holds deeper meaning: identity, rank, honor. You lose a duel, you may be forced to cut your own top knot, an act of humiliation, so intense, it was worse than death for many. And when a warrior chose to cut it off, it meant they were retiring, or shamed, or both. You glance at your own reflection in a polished bronze mirror. Suddenly that messy bun doesn't feel so low stakes. Travel now to Renaissance Europe, where royalty begins trading armor for lace. But their obsession with hair remains just as intense. You find yourself in the court of Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, and oh boy, it's a forest of wigs in here. Towering powdered confections made of real human hair, sometimes animals stiffened with flour and oils, sometimes crawling with lice. Yes, those ridiculous little scratches were a fashion hazard. These perukes weren't just dramatic, they were declarations. Louis wore wigs to hide his balding head. Sure, but he turned the fix into fashion. Soon, every nobleman in Europe had to wear one. Refusing meant looking poor, old, or scandalously bald. Women followed suit, literally, with sky-high styles called pouf. These could include feathers, ships, model gardens, or miniature battle scenes. One duchess allegedly wore a wig depicting her baby's birth. That's commitment, and yet, behind the flamboyance, there was strategy. Royals knew that appearances maintained control. If your hair screamed wealth and divine right, people were less likely to question your power. In that sense, hair became a crown you could change, and in doing so, manipulate how the world saw you. Let's not skip Africa's royal courts. Either among the Yoruba, Ashanti, and Zulu nobility, hair was sculpted like ceremonial art. Kings have royal barbers, and their styles were meant to invoke gods, ancestors, or animals. One Ashanti king was said to have braided his hair in the shape of a spider, a nod to Anansi, the trickster, deity, and keeper of stories. His enemies got the message: I'm clever, I'm connected, don't mess with me. And here's your quirky fact of the night. Some Ethiopian emperors used braided wigs that included goat hair to appear larger than life during public ceremonies. These were stored in ivory cases and passed down like crowns. You walk now into a dimly lit hall in ancient Persia, where elite women of the Achaemenid Empire style their hair into intricate coil crowns, then wrap them with translucent veils edged in gold thread. These women weren't just royal, they were sacred symbols of fertility and celestial order. Their hairstyles were part of court ceremony, ritual, the shape of the bun specific, the direction of the part regulated. You mess that up, and you might as well offend the gods directly. By this point, in your head starting to feel a little heavy with centuries of symbolic bobby pins and weighted meaning. But it's not just about kings and queens. Sometimes, a single cut can spark an entire movement. Remember Joan of Arc, the young peasant girl turned warrior who cut her hair short and wore men's armor? Riding into battle, claiming divine visions, her hair wasn't just practicality. It was protest, defiance, gender rebellion in a century where that could and did get you burned at the stake. So now, as you walk through the quiet, echoing corridors of royal chambers across continents and centuries, you begin to see what hair has always been in the hands of the powerful: a weapon, a shield, a message. And the next time you sit in a salon chair or brush your hair before bed, maybe, just maybe, you'll remember that somewhere. Someone once built an empire on a braid, but don't get too comfortable yet. We've still got warriors to braid, battlefields to cross, and war cries to untangle. You wake up in dust and drumbeats. This time, you're not in a palace. You're standing at the edge of a battlefield. The air smells like sweat, leather, and the electric buzz of tension. Because tonight, hair isn't about ceremony or seduction. It's armor. It's intimidation. It's defiance, braided, so tight it hurts. You're among the Celts now. Yes. Those Celts, the fierce tribes of Iron Age Europe. Their warriors stand bare-chested in the misty dawn, blue woad painted across their skin, and their hair pulled into gravity-defying spikes, using a mix of lime and animal fat. That's right. They're literally using cow goo to keep those spikes battle-ready. Functional, debatable, terrifying. Absolutely. Mainstream historians confirm that this wasn't random styling. It was psychological warfare. The Celts wanted you to look across the field and hesitate, to question your life choices, to picture what that hair might smell like and then run. But war hair didn't belong to just the boys. You shift east, into Scythian territory, nomadic horseback, warriors of the Eurasian steppes. And guess what? Women fought too. Archaeologists have uncovered graves of Scythian women buried with both weapons and elaborate hair ornaments. Many had tightly braided hair, adorned with gold, bone, or iron beads. Some even wore crescent-shaped plaques, believed to be both decorative and functional. Ever tried pinning up your braid with a dagger? Yeah, these ladies made it work. One fringe detail that gives modern stylists chills. Some Scythian women may have used animal sinew, not thread, to bind their braids. Tough. Unbreakable. Weather-resistant. Try that at your next salon appointment and see how long your stylist screams. You ride with them across the plains, hair streaming like banners behind you, and you start to see what battle hair really means. It says, I'm ready. I'm part of something. I might die, but I will look mythical doing it. Now duck, because you're dodging arrows in feudal Japan. The samurai are here again. This time, pre-battle. They sit in neat rows while apprentices help tie their chonmage, the classic top knot tight to the crown. Their heads are half-shaved in the front, a style that started to help helmets fit better and evolved into a rigid cultural code. Samurai shaved their foreheads to signal discipline, clarity of mind, an absence of ego. Try telling that to your next barista when you show up with a shaved widow's peak. Historians still argue whether the front shaving was originally practical or purely symbolic. Some believe the scalp had to breathe under heavy armor. Others think it was just fashion that stuck like mochi to a sandal. You shift again. You're with the Vikings now, standing on a longship as it cuts through cold, churning water. Your breath fogs the air, and every man and many women on board has carefully arranged their hair. The Vikings weren't wild and scraggly like Hollywood loves to pretend. They carried combs made of antler or bone. They bathed. They braided. Some had one braid down the back. Others wore tight sides with long hair on top. It wasn't just for looks. It helped keep hair out of the face during combat, protected the scalp under helmets, and made them instantly recognizable in their own community. In Norse culture, hair wasn't a luxury. It was identity, function, and respectability. You catch sight of a Viking war leader whose beard is sectioned into 3 precise strands, each tipped with small iron beads. Some scholars think beard braiding like this symbolized age, authority, or clan loyalty. Or maybe it was just their version of don't talk to me before I've had mead. Now land in sub-Saharan Africa again. But this time, you're with the Maasai of East Africa, warrior boys, or Morans, wear striking red shukars and style their hair into long ochre-covered braids. The braids are dyed with a mixture of red ochre and animal fat, shaped to frame the face in dramatic curves. When a boy becomes a man, his braids are shaved off during a ceremonial rite of passage. Hair here is both the proof of youth and the badge of adulthood, and the transition between them is epic. One quirky tidbit: the Maasai sometimes use cow urine to help set the ochre-dyed hair in place. Functional, sure, but not exactly Pantene. Hair for battle doesn't always look aggressive. In some Native American Plains tribes, warriors wore long, glossy braids decorated with feathers, bones, or bits of shell. The style itself wasn't just visual flair, it was a record. Each feather could symbolize a deed or spirit vision. Some warriors would only cut their hair in mourning or deep disgrace. Their braids were often as long as the stories they held. You're walking alongside a Lakota man now, and he's braiding his son's hair before a hunt. It's a quiet ritual, one knot for strength, another for clarity, another for guidance. He whispers a blessing with each pull. Historians confirm that many native cultures viewed hair as an extension of the soul. To cut, it wasn't just cosmetic, it was symbolic death. It's why colonizers often forced captives to shear their hair, as a deliberate act of dehumanization. The trauma, still remembered, still resisted. And now, your boots crunch through the snow of 20th century Siberia. You're among Soviet prisoners, in a gulag, hair shaved to strip away identity, dignity, and humanity. You see it again in World War II, as women accused of collaborating with Nazis had their heads forcibly shaved in public squares. The crowd watched not just a punishment, but a ritual, a spectacle of shame, because even outside of battle, hair was often the first thing to go in psychological warfare. Cut the braid, and you erase the legacy. Shave the head, and you rewrite the story. But here's the defiant beauty of it all. You step into a resistance camp during the Algerian War of Independence. A woman ties her thick black hair into a high knot. She'll carry messages beneath it later. A teenager in apartheid-era South Africa chooses to grow out their afro, rejecting colonial norms. In 1970s America, Black Panthers wear their natural curls like crowns. Resistance, pride, and reclamation, all knotted into one powerful puff. Hair becomes protest. You see it again and again. Shaved heads at punk rock concerts. Uncovered curls in the streets of Tehran. Braids. Dreads. Twist-outs. Mohawks. And messy buns. Each one whispering or screaming, "I'm here. You won't cut me down." You feel it too, don't you? That quiet roar running down your spine. Hair is no longer passive. It's become action, memory, message. So you keep walking through the battlefields of time, ducking arrows, stepping over discarded braids, passing by warriors who style their legacy before even sharpening their swords. Because up next, you're about to brush through modern revolutions, forbidden stools, and hair that starts hashtags. You open your eyes to neon lights and camera flashes. The air hums with static and distant music. And suddenly, you're not walking beside warriors or weaving through temples. You're standing on a sidewalk in the 21st century, though the past is still braided tightly into the present. Because here, hair is rebellion, memory, and identity made shareable, retweetable, viral. Tonight, you're in a world where hair still starts revolutions, just on a different stage. You begin in the barbershops and salons of Black America during the Civil Rights Movement. The clippers buzz, hot combs sizzle. But this isn't just a place to get fresh. It's a cultural stronghold, an unofficial headquarters of pride and protest. You watch as a young woman steps into the street, natural hair sculpted into a perfect sphere, an afro, a political statement, loud as any chant. Mainstream fact, the afro, popularized in the 1960s and 70s, wasn't just about rejecting Eurocentric beauty standards. It was reclaiming space, saying, "This is who we are, and we will not shrink." The bigger the hair, the bolder the message. Angela Davis didn't just teach revolution, she wore it. Then the 1980s crash in. All shoulder pads and Aquanet. Air goes big. Again but differently. You glance around and see mullets, mohawks, perms, jerry curls, crimped bangs, on runways, MTV, red carpets. Suddenly, hair is fast, loud, and unapologetically weird, but it's still coded, still loaded. A mohawk on a punk teen in London screams defiance. A jerry curl on a black kid in Chicago. A complicated dance of aspiration, identity, and systemic pressure. Then you're standing backstage at a ballroom drag show in 1990s, New York. The wigs are sculpted skyscrapers. The lace front's flawless. You watch a queen adjust her hairpiece with the precision of a surgeon. This isn't just drag. It's armor, expression, survival. Hair is everything. Someone whispers, hair is the fantasy. Quirky tidbit. Early queens sometimes used industrial glue to secure their wigs. That's commitment. Or a lawsuit waiting to happen. Jump continents. You're in Tehran now, where a young woman is pushing strands of her dark hair just past the legal limit of her headscarf. It's a small gesture, technically illegal, but it's an act of control in a place where hair is fiercely policed. You walk beside her as whispers rise tension, fear, and quiet, breathless resistance. In 2022, the world watched as the death of Mahsa Amini, arrested for allegedly wearing her hijab improperly, sparked protests across Iran. Women cut their hair publicly, filmed it, posted it. Hair was no longer a passive marker of modesty or culture. It became an international rallying cry. Historians still argue whether the veil has always been a symbol of oppression, or whether its meaning changes entirely, depending on who chooses to wear it. Either way, one fact stays fixed when women cut their hair in protest. The world notices. Now you're scrolling through TikTok modern. Endless. Slightly terrifying. Hairstyles flash by in seconds, slicked edges. Shaggy wolf cuts. Rainbow dye jobs. Fade designs sharp enough to slice bread. You tap into a live stream where a teenage girl in Seoul is explaining her Heim-cut cheek-length side locks with long straight hair in back. A nod to Japanese princesses. A quiet rebellion against K-pop uniformity. It's cute, she says, but you hear what's unspoken, it's mine. And here's a mainstream trend. Gen Z is reclaiming hair at warp speed. They're reviving mullets with ironic swagger. They're dyeing roots to look grown out on purpose. They're rejecting perfection and embracing chaos. But don't forget the consequences. You're in a high school in Texas. A black boy is sent home for wearing locks. Not too long ago, that same style was called unkempt, unprofessional, even gang-affiliated. But now, there's the Crown Act legislation to stop hair-based discrimination in schools and workplaces. Slowly, stubbornly, the tide shifts. You pass a courtroom where testimony is being given. A woman talks about being denied a job because of her afro. A man describes shaving his beard for work, even though it went against his religion. Air discrimination. You realize is still deeply rooted, but people are pushing back. They're bringing receipts, tweets, documentaries, HR complaints. Hair is no longer just hair. It's evidence. It's a battleground. And now you're on the red carpet. Cameras flash as an actress arrives in full cornrows, gold beads, sculpted edges, a braid crown that touches the sky. She looks divine. But tomorrow, the tabloids will debate, is it cultural appropriation or appreciation? Historians still argue whether cultural borrowing through hair can ever be clean cut, or whether history always leaves residue. But one thing's clear: who wears a style, who profits from it, and who gets punished for it. That all still matters. Step away from the red carpet and into a kitchen. A mother is parting her daughter's hair into neat sections, weaving small braids with practiced hands. They chat about school, about TikTok, about history. She pauses, only to smooth down an edge with pomade and patience. You realize then, hair care is still community. Still ritual, a passed-down language. And here's your final little twist of the night. Recent scientific studies show that hair holds traces of stress hormones, like tree rings recording drought. Your hair might literally carry your emotional timeline. That's not spiritual metaphor. That's lab confirmed. So the next time you run your fingers through your hair, or decide to cut it all off at 2 a.m., remember, your strands hold memory, identity, protest, pride. You've made it. Traveler, from sacred temples to glam squads, from war paint to workplace policy, you've followed the hairline of history across continents and centuries. And now, it's time to let it all unwind. Wind down 300 words. Your journey ends in Kiat. The lights fade to low amber. The noise of centuries, the clang of armor, the whisper of veils. The hum of barbershop clippers softens into a gentle hush. Like hair falling onto a marble floor, you feel the weight of everything you've carried through time, braids laced with defiance, crowns built from curls, and strands that once held the scent of frankincense or fear. Now, those memories drift into a soft silence. Breathe in. Slowly. Let it go. You run your fingers through your own hair. Maybe it's short. Maybe wild. Maybe not even yours right now. And feel the quiet echo of those who came before. The monks and warriors. The rebels and royals. The girls who wore red ribbons to dance. And the boys who twisted dreadlocks in protest. Tonight, their stories are woven into your own. Not heavy, not loud, just there, settled, like a braid, finally tied. So rest easy. The wars are paused. The brushes are set down. No more debates. No more scissors. Just the soft hum of time, smoothing itself out. You're safe now. And your story, your style is still unfolding. Now close your eyes. Let your scalp cool. And let sleep comb through your thoughts with the gentlest hands. End of script. Sweet dreams.